I should have used GPT to come up with a proper disclaimer, a legally binding one.
Yeah. I'm going to need to literally read that every single time. Are we good?
Yeah.
Are we live? Oh, we're live. Awesome. Everybody here okay?
Yes.
We got Lynette in the chat helping us out tonight. Thank you so much, Lynette. Questions are already coming in. This is amazing. So let's get started. Mr. Mondo Gonzales, thank you so much for coming back. Every time a guest comes back, it's like, okay, well, we're not terrible. We're not terrible. We're not the worst. So Mondo, we are so honored to have you. The people that follow Venice love you. And we have gleaned so much wisdom from you these last few times, and lots of laughs. Although I did hear some sad news before the podcast that really broke my heart. But I don't know if I can talk about it yet. It's still fresh.
Still fresh.
But thank you so much, Mondo. For you who do not know Mondo, because we have had some new followers recently. Mr. Mondo Gonzales, my dad in another life, is a Bible teacher, pastor, archaeologist. Is that what they're labeling you as well?
I get to have a label. Yep.
Co-host on Prophecy Watchers. I'm reading what Chat wrote about you, so it's not me, it's Chat. He focuses on Bible prophecy, eschatology, archaeology, theology, a lot of ologies, and Israel, which we're going to talk about tonight.
It specifically has that as its own category.
Yeah. Wow.
Israelology. It should be Israelology.
Man, I got a label.
He appears on sites like prophecywatchers.com, Screwtape Study Guide, right?
Yes.
Which I still haven't gotten into, man. And it's on my list, and it's just, I'm getting closer and closer to it. And he also leads Psalm 19 Project, which is awesome. And my daughter and I enjoy that a lot. He's on social media. You can find him everywhere. Is there a direct link that you want to plug real quick, Mondo?
Just prophecywatchers.com is the main place.
Okay, very cool. Mondo, thank you so much again. Hey, if you're here, please like this video, subscribe, share, comment. The chats are open. Lynette's going to help us. We're going to try to get to all your questions if we can. Don't be mad if we can't. Sometimes the topic changes so quickly, and then we lost out on the other questions. So please don't get mad at me. Get mad at Lynette. She's the one helping us with that. So you can get mad at her. I'm just kidding. Thank you. We're going to get started here. But Ben has an important announcement to make before we dive in.
Before we get into the discussion for this evening, I must say these are just our opinions. Ben and Dennis, together we are Bennis. These are our opinions. They don't represent anybody else. Because I realized in a recent discussion that we're pretty crazy. And so we want to make sure that people know our guests don't necessarily agree with us, and they're here to help us be less crazy. So let's thank them for that. Tonight's topic, excuse me, is on the prophecy in Daniel 9 of the 70 weeks. Okay. That's all I want to talk about. And it's just like a few verses, but the more I studied it to get ready for this, the more confused I am. So I can't be more grateful that you're here. You're going to have an opinion on it and like an interpretation of it and stuff like that. But I've also been trying to understand the other arguments because there's a lot of different perspectives on this. And now my head's a mess. So I'm glad you're here to help unscramble my brain. And if anybody has questions along the way, put them in there, because this specific conversation came about because a few episodes ago, Dennis and I were talking about some prophecies in Zechariah, and in the context of the passages or the prophecies, it seemed like, oh, this is just talking about Jesus and the times where he was alive and how they got fulfilled, right? And then one of them was that prophecy where it says, and they will look on him who they have pierced and they will mourn for him. And I'm like, why do they take that and apply that to something like 2,000 years in the future, like end times prophecy, when it seems like it's just fulfilled at that point in time? And in our chat, people are like, oh, you should get Mondo on and ask him. I'm like, that's a great idea. And because you are the prophecy watcher, okay? At least for us. And so then we started talking about Daniel and the 70 weeks. And I'm like, dude, why did they take that and put it 2000 years into the future? So that's how things have kind of have overlapped. And I figured it'd be a great idea to get you here to help us understand. Would you say it's the dispensational perspective, like to take some of these prophecies and put them 2000 years into the future? Or do you think that that's just like the standard understanding?
That's a great question, because my goal in discussing the topic is kind of to discuss all the various views, honestly, and to be able to navigate through all of them and kind of explain what one group says, what another says. But um, to answer specifically your question, it depends on the particular prophecy. There's no doubt there are some prophetic areas like this one, which a dispensationalist would see as future, where I think something like Zechariah 12:10, no matter what your view is, most theologians are going to see that as a future event, especially in the book of Zechariah. Zechariah 12:10, they'll look upon him whom they pierced.
Mhm.
So most people would say, well, that one, yeah, that one's pretty much future, because even some of the, if you say, in the sense of the two major camps today, you have a dispensational viewpoint, and then on this side you have a covenant theology or reformed theology. Oftentimes, those labels are identical, and so depending on the prophecy, both of them could agree on some things as it relates to the second coming. And then others, they'll have a disagreement on how to approach a specific passage. So depending on which passage you're talking about.
Okay. And specifically with the Daniel 9 stuff, okay, which is the 70 weeks prophecy,
Mhm.
right? It gets real mathematical and real detailed.
Mhm.
So we're definitely going to nerd out and get detailed because it's important, right? And can you you think you could give us just like a little bit of context before we read that specific passage? Can you give us a little context about what's going on, where Daniel's at, what he's doing, why it's happening, just things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I appreciate that you say that, because what we see, we don't have to go through all of it, but in Daniel 9, I'll just read the first couple verses. In the first year of Darius, son of Ahasuerus, who was of Median descent and who had been appointed king over the Babylonian Empire, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, came to understand from the sacred books that the number of years for the fulfilling of the desolation of Jerusalem, which had come as the Lord's message to the prophet Jeremiah, would be 70 years. So I turned my attention to the Lord God to implore him by prayers and requests with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. And so then it gives his whole prayer, which this is beautiful, because in Jeremiah 25, which is the scripture that he's referring to, he saw that based on Jeremiah, who was his contemporary, that the captivity would be 70 years only. And so he's like, hey, this is roughly 537, BC, right around there, 538 BC, where he's realizing, hey, the 70 years are up. And so he's probably by this time 85. So he got taken over when he was in his teens. And so you add close to 68, 70 years. So he's in his 80s now, and he's realizing this is going to end. And so he goes, I kind of find it funny. Prophecy, God had given the prophecy, but now he prays for that prophecy to be fulfilled. It's like, well, why would he even need to pray that? It's God spoke it, it's going to happen. But nevertheless, this is the blessing of where, even though prophecy has been prophesied, we have the ability to participate in it. And so Daniel prays. So this is what he prays, and then of course he gives his whole prayer, which we won't go into. And then in verse 20, he says, while I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin, which he just did, he said, yes, while I was still praying, Gabriel shows up, whom I had seen previously in a vision. So the angel Gabriel, who we know from Luke chapter 1, spoke to Mary, spoke to Zacharias. And he was approached me in my state of extreme weariness around the time of the evening offering. So then he begins to say, he says, at the beginning of your request, a message went out. I have come to convey it to you, for you are one of great value, or very beloved in God's sight. Therefore, consider the message and understand the vision. So that's the prep here, is that Daniel is thinking, okay, the 70 years are up. So we're gonna go back. And so he's praying about it. Gabriel shows up and then says, listen, I'm going to give you some more details. And we'll see in verse 24 what he says. But I'm going to give you some more details specifically about you, the Jewish people, and the city of Jerusalem. So that's the backdrop.
Okay, so he realizes the time might be up, and then starts praying to God for, I don't know. Was Daniel he knew he was a prophet? Did he have like other prophecies for Israel and stuff beforehand?
Oh yeah, I mean the rest of the book of Daniel. There's no doubt. I think Daniel, more than any of the other prophets, truly was what they would call an apocalypticist, in that he gets angels showing up to him. I mean, Ezekiel, you might compare Ezekiel, but not just Gabriel shows up, but he's in Daniel 10. Another angel shows up and is like, in the next chapter, is like, hey, I was on my way to tell you some more things. And then I had to remember, this is all the Daniel 10. Michael had to come help. There was a big fight going on with the Prince of Persia. So you have all that. And then, of course, you have his visions of Daniel 7, which are a repeat or a different perspective of the Daniel 2 prophecy of Nebuchadnezzar and the statue. And then in Daniel 8, he gets another visitation where now he's talking about really the progress between the Persian Empire into the Greek Empire and Alexander the Great. That's all Daniel chapter 8. And now you have chapter 9 where he's just blown away. He's pretty amazing for sure.
So he gets a lot of stuff, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so he realizes their time might be up in captivity and that God might be doing something here soon. And then the angel appears to him and gives him basically this prophecy of, how would you call it? Like 70 weeks, but it's not even 70 weeks because each one of the days is 7 years. So it's actually a prophecy of 490 years. Is that right?
So yeah, so let's unpack that, because this is where in Hebrew, so this passage is in Hebrew. A lot of the inward parts from Daniel 2 to Daniel 8 are in Aramaic. But here, the text is very fascinating. It switches back to Hebrew. So what we're introduced here is some idioms. So for example, if I say to you, hey man, I went to the store and I got a dozen, you would be like, okay, a dozen what?
Yeah,
right?
Donuts.
Dozen donuts. It could be a dozen bottles of Pepsi. It could be a dozen loaves of bread. So the idea of dozen is a word in English that we use as a generic marker, ultimately meaning 12, right? So we know it's usually 12. Now we're not talking about a baker's dozen, 12 of something. And so if I was just going around spouting that I have a dozen, you would have to know what the context is. Well, in Hebrew, it's the word shavua, and it's the word sheva is the word for 7. Okay, just if you want to say, I'm coming over at Sheva, I'm coming. We started at Sheva. We started at 7. Okay, so the word shavua is this idea of a seventh of something. Think of it like a dozen. It is a 7. If I say, hey man, I went and got a 7, you'd be like, a 7 of what? I got a 7 of something. So in the same way, this is the word the way it's used. And so when the angel comes, he says, I'm speaking to you, and there's going to be 77s, or in one sense, 70 dozen. And you would say 70 dozen what? Well, again, in Hebrew, we see this in Genesis. Remember, you guys probably know the story for sure. Remember when Jacob went over and he had his eyes on Rachel. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh yeah, man. And so Rachel loved him. He loved her. And then so he made a deal with his basically uncle, Laban. Laban was pretty tricky. So what's the story? What happened? So that night she's got a veil on. He's married. He brings her into the bedroom. It's dark, whatever. And then in the morning, it's Leah. He's like, whoa, what? I got tricked, right? But what Laban says to him is, well, if you fulfill Rachel's Shavua, week. See, we say a week. If you fulfill her 7, I'll give you Rachel 2. So when we see 70 weeks, really the word is Shavua, 77s. And so then the question is in Jewish thinking, you could have, we know this, you can have a 7 days. That's a week. So that's why it's often fulfill her week. Fulfill her 7 and you'll have her. Well, they also have a 7-year period, right? So we call this a Shemitah type cycle. And then if you have 7 of those, 7 times 7, then you come to what we see as a kind of a jubilee. So you can have 7 days, you can have 7 years, you can have 7 years of 7 years. So if we get in our mind that just out of the gate, there's 77s are determined. And so then the question is, well, are these 70 group, is this a block of 7 days or is this a block of 7 years? And ultimately, everybody agrees on this, that it is a block of 70 weeks or 77s of years, which, as you said, 70 times 7 years is 490 years. So that's pretty universal all across the board. I think context, even Jewish people who don't believe in Jesus, they recognize that this is 70 times 7 years.
Okay. So from now on, when it says weeks, we're talking about a block of 7 years, right?
Especially here in this.
Okay.
Now, granted, we know that, like, again, so this is the question. When Jacob told Rachel, or when Laban told Jacob, fulfill her a week, most scholars would say that that's a 7-year period. And so he got to marry her. He didn't have to wait a whole another 7 years. He worked 7 years. Remember, that's the context. He worked 7 years, which was 1 week of 7. And then he got tricked. And then Laban's like, well, I'll tell you what, you owe me another 7 if you want the other one. And so the idea is that he married her again, but he had both of them, but he had to serve out the 7. So we're very consistent here. This isn't unusual. This is a very Jewish idiom going back to the book of Genesis.
Cool. Okay. So verse 24 of Daniel 9, we'll just start there. Again, it's just a few verses. So the angel comes to Daniel and says, 70 weeks are declared about your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. And that verse, or that word there, holy place, can also mean holy thing or holy one, if you click the little letter that opens up the details. So basically, we have a list here of something that's going to happen in the next 490 years, right? It's going to be, first off, it's declared for his people, so the Jews, and your holy city, which would be Jerusalem, right? That's like the context of the prophecy. And it's to, the things he specifically says is to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place or holy one. So that's like, would you say that's the context of what's coming after in the prophecy? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Mondo, your mic might be muted. Oh, wait, here. It says, did you click a button? Can't unmute guest because he chose to mute himself. Hey,
maybe the batteries run out or something.
Mondo, there might be a button on this. There might be a button on the screen that you have to click.
There it is. I'm back.
There it is.
Yes.
How's that happen? I have no idea.
It's strange.
That's strange. Get behind me, Satan, right?
Amen.
So this is super important to understand that what he lists 6 items here. So that the point is that those 6 items are not going to be fulfilled until the full 70 weeks are complete. So whatever the opinion is on the 70 weeks, and we'll get into that, whatever approach is taken has to provide at least some level of evidence that all of these things will be accomplished by the end of those. So if somebody wants to end that in the 1st century, which is one viewpoint, then all these 6 things have to be completely done, versus if that's going to be a future event, then those have to be done as well. So as we talk about some of these, there is a couple things that are important here. Because no matter what you have, each group, and I'll be fair and honest in each group, in that if you have a 1st century fulfillment or a future fulfillment, let's say in the tribulation period or after Jesus returns in great glory with his angels, um, you do see rebellion. I'll say it this way: when Jesus returns, depending on your perspective, but a futurist perspective is going to see that when Jesus returns in great glory with all his angels, he judges the world, he fixes the world. The Antichrist is caught, the false prophet's caught, Satan's bound, they're put in prison. And like Isaiah 11 says, the wolf will lay down with the lamb, the lion's eating straw like ox. People will, Isaiah 2, people will turn their swords into plowshares. There's going to be a supernatural kingdom being rooted from Israel with Jesus as the lead. Jesus' promise in Matthew 19 to the 12 disciples, 12 apostles, you're going to sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes. All those are going to be very literally fulfilled. And so in that kingdom, at the start of that kingdom, all these 6 things will then have just been accomplished. But when we talk about, well, wait a minute, during the millennium, there's what about their sin? It says to bring sin to a completion. See, iniquity's already been atoned, to put an end to rebellion, perpetual righteousness, to authenticate prophetic prophecy or vision, and to anoint the most holy person or the place. Well, in the time of the millennium, all those things would be fulfilled. That sin as a dominating influence is over, because most of the people living during the millennial period are going to be in their glorified bodies. And remember, there's no external temptations anymore, because Satan and the demons are all locked up. So there's still sin in the millennium, and so that doesn't violate this passage. But it's talking about sin as a dominating influence, which has been what we've seen. So as we look at the parameters right out of the gate, is once those 70 weeks are done, all these things will have been accomplished.
Okay, got it. So is it fair to say also then that within the 490 years, those things are accomplished?
Correct. That's exactly right. That's what I'm saying, is that whatever viewpoint you have, if someone says it's all done in the first century, which is one viewpoint, it's pretty clear that all those things are not done.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
That's why I would say I don't see how that could be a fulfillment or how that could be true, because all those things. But if you look at a futurist view, which is the view that I hold, but again, people that don't agree with me, that's fine. We're all brothers in Christ. So what?
Yeah.
We just see it differently, and that's okay. But I see that at the end of the tribulation period, once Jesus comes back, all those things will have been accomplished by then. Not now, clearly, but by then, when he starts the millennial period, it will, all those things, check, will have been fulfilled.
Got it. Okay. And I think this would be a good time to say that, hey, there's 2 primary perspectives, right? There's one that says all of this entire 490-year period and those 6 things we just listed at the beginning of the prophecy have all been fulfilled by the time of what, 80, 70, the destruction
70.
of the temple, right?
That would be, yep.
And then there's the futurist perspective, which you hold to, which is that some of these things were accomplished, but there's still some that are yet to be fulfilled, and that there's a gap between the 69th week and the 70th week in the prophecy, right? Those are like the 2 primary perspectives.
Yep. Those are the 2 primary, absolutely 2 primary perspectives, which again is kind of fun.
Yeah, to say the least. I said scrambled.
But very complicated for sure. Yes, it is a brain scramble. I mean, I've been studying this and teaching it for 30 some years. So, but I can say that when I first started looking at it, and I was like, what in the world? And then you just start wrapping your head around it. And of course, as you learn the rest of scripture, you can see, oh, okay, I see now how it's blending. And also, I'll tell you what, I have great compassion for those that see it as being fulfilled in the first century, because I can understand where they're coming from, because of their desire to exalt Jesus. And but even though again I see the themes there, and we could talk about that, I just say, well, it's not as consistent, and we'll see why.
Okay, cool. Okay, let's keep reading. So now we're in verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of the anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. And for 62 weeks, it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. Okay, so here comes the math. All right. And this is where we lose everybody that can't follow along with math like myself. I literally have to just like keep writing stuff down and then transferring like weeks to years to this to that, you know? Because I'm very visual. So I have like a chart that I have to make. Otherwise you just get lost, you know? Okay, so
let's unpack this.
Yeah, what's the easiest way to unpack this?
Okay.
Unless you've got charts next to you and you're like looking at it, what's the easiest way to verbalize it for the people listening and watching?
Okay, so 25, let's take it in verse 25, let's take it in sequence. There's an issuing of a command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Okay, so right there, that's your starting point. And there were various commands that people discuss in history or decrees that talk about the Jews. For example, you see in Isaiah 45 and even the book of Nehemiah and Ezra, you see commands where the king had told the Jewish people to go back. So there's various decrees, and you see those in the passages. Well, here, what you see is the command. It's very, very specific. The starting point for this 490 years is the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Okay. So what it's saying is, first and foremost, it's giving us the kind of a summary view. And it says, okay, when you hear the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, and it says, until what? It says, until an anointed one, a prince arrives, until the anointed one, the Mashiach here. So I love the word until. You have a starting point, and then until you have an ending point. And so what it's saying is there's going to be, it says here, there will be a period of 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So now what it does is it says, okay, I'm going to give you something as well. I'm going to give you a period of 7 times 7, 7 sevens, because remember, 7 weeks, 49 years.
So
you're going to have 4. So 7 times 7 is 49. So why I know why it does it, but it's a little bit awkward. Let's just be honest. So it says, okay, and from the command until the Messiah appears, there's going to be a group of 7 years or 7 weeks, 49 years. And then there's going to be another group of 62. So if you add those together, 62 and 7, the total is going to be 69 weeks or 483 years. But why does it split it into 7 and 62, which is odd, because this is why. Because then it says, keep it in context. This is about rebuilding, restoring, and rebuilding Jerusalem, not the people. This has nothing to do with the people going back. Well, Artaxerxes gave a command. You can read about this in the book of Nehemiah. He gave a command to go back and rebuild the temple. And so this was in 445 BC. So what you see then is they spent between that time of the command to going and really finishing it all, it took 49 years. That's kind of the idea. That's why he separates it out, and it says, look, it's going to be built again with the plaza and the moat, but in distressful times. So we all know the book of Nehemiah. What was he doing? He had a shovel in this hand and a sword in the other hand, right? So that's why it says it this way. It says, from the time of the decree until when the Messiah arrives, 49 years, and then the 62 times 7, what is that? 434. So you're gonna have those two groups, right? So that's why it says it that way. The 49 years, you have all the city being built, blah blah blah, and then the rest of the time. So this gives us a very clear marker. The most important thing for us is he gives us the total. The 62 and the 7 is 69. So hey, he's saying, listen, pay attention. From 445, some people say 444. So scholars will argue about it, but for the most part, that's very, very clear because it's specific about the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Fast forward now, basically 483 years, and you get to the Messiah. You get to the arrival of the Messiah. So when you look at that and you calculate the numbers all the way through, what the one of the best, I would say, the most thorough introduction of this was by a guy by the name of Sir Robert Anderson. He wrote a book around in the late 1800s called The Coming Prince. You can get it probably for $15. Great book. So if you calculate then the 69 weeks times 7, it's 483 years. Well, one of the things that they've discussed here is that these years are prophetic years, which is 360 days. So if you try to calculate it out with 365.24 days per year, it's going to put you in weird places. But they bring up these prophetic years, and it comes to 173,880 days. Okay, so if you do the math, so here let's summarize. Okay, Daniel 9:25, from the time of the command to rebuild until the Messiah arrives, till he comes, is 173,880 days. Well, it's interesting that when Sir Robert Anderson calculated this out, it comes to April 6th of 32 AD, the day of the triumphal entry. Jesus showed up. Boom. An exact mathematical calculation, which
That's
Gabriel,
wild, man.
it's wild.
That's
And
insane.
so the fascinating thing about it is, this is why in Matthew 16, Jesus is telling the Pharisees, and he's basically excoriating them. You know how to discern the sky when their sky is red. You say this, but you can't discern the sign of the times. Look at everything around you. You have Daniel's prophecy. Daniel's prophecy is crystal clear. From the time of that command until my arrival is exactly 173,880 days. And now I wish we had that for his second coming, don't you? Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
But he gave this mathematical prophecy, which is again why this is why later in Luke 19, at the triumphal entry, Jesus is coming in, and he's coming in on a donkey, which I want to go to that passage in a little bit. Zechariah 9:9, because he comes in, and what's he doing? They're laying down the palm branches. Hosanna, 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 son of David, right? But what's he doing? He's crying. He's weeping. John 12, Luke 19. Why? Because he says, I wish you would have known the things that belong to you, but you did not recognize the time of your visitation. Now all these things are hidden from you.
That's good.
So that's the key thing here, is that as of right now, we're not talking about this last week. What about that 70th week? We're not talking about that yet.
Sure.
Because the text isn't talking about it. The text is simply, he's clearly making an association between two things: the start from the command to build the city until the Messiah is 173,880 days. And then he gives us some more information. But now here's the key. Once that Messiah arrives, the 69 weeks are complete. Okay, that's important. Because then he's going to tell us about some other things that happen after that completion. But so then the question is, well, okay, Mondo, and I'll show you, you'll see it. It'll pop and you'll be like, oh, wow. The 69 weeks were contiguous. They were sequential. Well, why would you then insert a gap, which is what we'll talk about, before the start of the 70s? So if you went from the end of the 68th week, you're going right into the start of the 69th week, that 7 years, and then you get to the end of the 69th week. Why wouldn't you then start immediately into the 70th week of the last 7 years? That's a fair question. But we're going to see some very, not even hints in the text. We're going to see some clear things that show us that there's a gap there.
Okay. The breakdown of there's 7 years, or okay, let's put it this way. There's 1 week, then there's 68 weeks, and then there's one extra week. You see what I'm saying? Isn't that how it breaks down?
No. It breaks down with 7, 62, and then 1.
That's what I meant.
Yep.
Okay. But isn't it 1 week on the front end, then 62, and then 1?
There's no 1 week on the front end.
My freaking math is off.
Yep,
I told you I'm scrambled.
Well, yeah. So if we see in verse 25, it's very clear at the end. it says there will be a period of 7 weeks and 62. So 7 plus 62 is 69. So you're like, oh,
That's
okay.
it.
hmm
Yeah, and then there's one on the back end, right?
There's one on the back end, which
Okay.
he'll bring up in verse 27.
Okay, got it.
Mhm.
Then let's go on. Where were we? Verse 26.
Yep.
And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary itself. And the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and the end there shall be war. And to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. Should we stop there?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So let me pull up. I want to pull up. What version are you reading?
ESV, I think. Let me see.
Okay, perfect. That's excellent. That's
yeah,
what I was
ESV.
gonna. Okay. So let's bring up some other interesting things. Okay, so in 25, he has now introduced the building, the declaration to rebuild, and then he brings up this 7 weeks and then 62, and then what we know is at the end of those two sequences, you have the Messiah, right? Because he says until the Messiah, there's going to be these 7 and 2 or 7 and 62. Well, then he says something interesting in verse 26. And after the 62 weeks, well, why didn't he say after 69 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
But I think context is crystal clear that this is referring, because in order, he's bringing up, he brings up the 7 weeks first and then the 62. And then if you write it out, you'd be oh, well, what's next? Well, the last thing that he talked about was the 62 weeks. That's why he says after 62 weeks, which of course would include the other 7. Okay. Because why? How do we know that? Because he says the anointed one. Well, he brings up the anointed one again. Well, the anointed one we know arrives after those two sequences.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense, right? So now we have the 62 weeks ending. He says the anointed one will be cut off and have nothing. Well, who's the Mashiach that got cut off? And the word cut off here is karat. It's this idea of being killed. Clearly, everybody agrees, 100% universal. This is Jesus, except the Jews.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
but this is Jesus. He's cut off and he has nothing. So this puts us roughly, strongly, perfectly in 32 AD or 33 AD. Okay, we're locked in. Now we have a time marker. Okay, that's super important. He says this. Okay, and the people of the prince who is to come is future. Okay, the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end, the city and the sanctuary. Remember, what did we see in verse 24? He's talking about your people and the holy city. Okay, so he's, again, contextually, this is talking about those two things. He says they're going to destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and then to the end there shall be war, and desolations are decreed. Now, this is what we know. Okay, I wish I had a chart. The beginning, the decree. We have the decree, and then we have the 69 weeks ending.
Dennis, can you find a chart?
Yeah, no.
There actually are charts that are really helpful.
It's
super easy, yeah. So what do you have? You have after the 69 weeks is end, the Messiah is cut off. But then after that, you have the city and the sanctuary being destroyed. When did that happen?
70 AD.
70 AD. Now we have a period of 38 years between those two things, and the last week's not mentioned yet.
The last week's not mentioned yet.
Because that's in verse 27.
That's in verse 27. So what I'm saying is the text is crystal clear that he hasn't talked about the start of that last week yet, the start of that last 7-year period. But after the 69 weeks are over, between the ending of that and the start of that 70th week in verse 27, there's at least two things that are prophesied to happen. The Messiah would be cut off, 33 AD, and the temple would be destroyed, 70 AD. So we have at least a gap now of 38 years, minimum.
Mm.
And then sometime after the temple's destroyed, the sanctuary in the city, sometime after that, we go right into the next verse, which we're not there yet. It says he'll confirm the covenant for many for that last remaining week. So that last remaining week is not started until after the temple's destroyed. This, to me, is so crystal clear that it is not continuous. The 69 stops, the Messiah is killed. There's a period of time, 38 years, the temple's destroyed. Sometime after that, the last week begins when he, which we'll talk about who he is, confirms or makes that covenant with the many for that 7-year period. So this is why it's not totally ridiculous and crazy to say, oh, you're reading into the text. Why would there be a non-sequential thing? Well, where do we put it? Let me say it another way. Let's do a little math. Let's say it's 100% sequential. Okay. Then this, after the 69th week is completed, let's say 33 AD. Okay. Well, Jesus is cut off. We all know that's the case. If you add 7 years, let's say it just goes right in like all the rest of them. Mm-hmm. If you go to 7 more years, what do you get to? You get to the year 40, right? 33 plus 7 is 40. Mm-hmm. Well, remember what it said. At the end of that time, at the end of the 70 weeks of Daniel, wherever it ends, all those 6 things would have been accomplished. Eternal righteousness, sin, rebellion, etc. But then the text goes on to say, oh, but don't you know the city and the sanctuary is going to be destroyed? Well, how did we get over here? That's 70 AD. You see the problem? That means that the 70 weeks of Daniel would have finished in 40 AD, and we're not living in perpetual righteousness right now. In fact, 30 years after that, the temple was destroyed. So what we're doing then, if we force that, we're having the temple be destroyed, which is clearly referenced in the text. We're putting that outside after the 70 weeks of Daniel.
Yeah, I think that's where it starts like falling apart for the what do you call it? The people that think it was like all fulfilled.
Well, those would be either the preterist view or the partial preterist, or even some of the Reformed theology. I'm not going to say that all Reformed theology or covenant theologians are preterist or partial preterist, because they're not. Many of them are partial preterist, where they think everything was accomplished in 70 AD, all the prophecies, or most prophecies except Jesus' second coming. A full preterist, we can dismiss them. They're really whacked out. They don't believe there's any future. No more resurrections. I'm saying that in the nicest way I can. It's just really, really bad. But some of the partial preterists, like R.C. Sproul and others, I have a little bit more respect for them because they reject the preterist viewpoint. But this is the difficulty, because if they see a continuity there of all 490 years, and that 490 years would have ended basically, well, they actually think about it. I can explain that. At the latest would be 40 AD, because Jesus died in 33 AD. But that's, see, the way that they see it, which I'm shocked, honestly. What they see in verse 27, well, before we go to verse 27, okay, which we'll get to, and we can explain the different viewpoints there. Do you see the power of how the gap is demonstrated in the text itself based on the time that Jesus was killed and the destruction of the temple, the 2 things that it mentions?
Yeah, it definitely looks like there's, no matter how you math it, there's a gap.
There's a gap.
You know?
Because, at least 38 years.
Because realistically, let's say the 69 weeks are fulfilled up until the point Jesus dies, right? Nobody disagrees up until there, right? And then there's 1 week left. So like you said, if it's sequential, 7 years later would put us at around like 40 AD,
mm-hmm.
right? And the temple's not destroyed until 30 years after that. So no matter how you math it, there seems to be a gap either of 30 years until the temple's destroyed, or the last week is like 2,000 years in the future. So both parties have a gap, and somehow you got to make the math. You got to make the math. Okay.
Well, can I show you something?
Yeah.
So what scholars have shown, if I'm going to read a passage from Isaiah 61, okay, and then I'll read another passage from Zechariah 9:9. So in Isaiah 61, we see that Jesus shows up in Luke chapter 4 at the synagogue, And he comes in. People, this is a well-known story. It's typical for rabbis. He was a rabbi, for them to come in, and he's there in Nazareth, and they say, "Hey, why don't you read something?" So he gets up, and what he does though is he reads. They had something called the Torah readings, or the Haftarah readings, where it's on a schedule. It's worldwide right now. It's pretty cool. If you go to any synagogue in the world, and they're reading the same material that day.
Hmm.
It's like a lectionary. It is a lectionary. Okay, so this goes way back to the first century, and at least. So Jesus comes up, and they go, "Hey, would you come read?" So he says, "I'll read. I'm going to read today." So here in this passage, it says this: "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound. This is verse 2, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." And then in Luke chapter 4, it says he stops there to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, and he closes the scroll. Well, it's interesting, and he gets up and then he says, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." I mean, whoa! I mean,
Yeah.
this is total messianic prophecy. But if you notice, what is the next verse, the next half, the next sentence of Isaiah 61? I'll read Isaiah 61 verse 2 in its full. It says, "To proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, comma, and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn." It's interesting here that if you finish going through this, the rest of it, it's talking about, again, the good news, but the day of vengeance of the Lord, which we understand to be the day of the Lord, the day of wrath, that is this 7-year period of the book of Revelation. What I'm saying is, right there, Jesus is reading and he stops.
Yeah.
That comma so far has been around 2,000 years before you get to the fulfillment of the next part, which is the day of vengeance. And so thankfully he stopped, because if he would have read the whole thing and said, "Today this is fulfilled," oh man, judgment would have landed, right? So the point being is that scholars have shown that scripture, based on context, many times will jump in a single verse 2,000 years to the next section being fulfilled. So this idea of a gap is not unheard of. Let me read to you one more.
You don't think that comma is just referring to the destruction of the temple that's coming in 30 years or 40?
Well, let's say it is. Okay. I don't, the day of vengeance, if you look at the full day of vengeance, in all of its fullness, this is like, it's not just the temple and the Jews being killed. The day of vengeance in its fullness of Old Testament theology is, and we see it in Isaiah 13 as an example, is the entire judgment of all of the world. This is like, you see it in Isaiah 13. God's coming out of heaven to judge the wrath, the day of the Lord. In Isaiah 24, the earth is swinging like a drunkard, because God is just bringing massive judgment. So the day of vengeance in its fullness is this last, what we would call the day of the Lord, as we see in Revelation 6 through 18. But let's say no, Mondo, I don't agree with that. Okay, that's fine. That comma at least lasted 38 years until 70 AD. Right? So even if we were to go with it either way, we still proved that there's another passage of scripture with a gap of at least 38 years.
Yeah,
right?
so I guess we just need to pick which pattern we like more. A 38-year comma or a 2,000-year comma.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Well,
hey, you clicked it again. I think you clicked the button again.
Yeah.
What do you're so excited.
I'm going. Well, I'm looking over to this other window, and it's
the meme of the cat.
I love to use my hands when I talk. I probably should just keep my hands behind my back. I'll keep them in my pocket. So scholars show that there's at least 24, which we're not going to go through all of them, of these gaps, which show the distinction. What you're going to see is a distinction between Jesus's first coming and his second coming. which we know is roughly 2,000 years. So in Zechariah 9:9, we know this passage. This is where Jesus is riding on a donkey. He says, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." And then it says this, "I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim," verse 10, "and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off. And he shall speak peace to the nations. His rule shall be from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth." So what we know is that Jesus is not, he's in heaven, he's sovereign, but Jesus is not ruling from sea to sea, all the nations. He hasn't spoke peace to the nations yet, that's for sure, because he's going to come judge them, that we know at his second coming. So between 9:9, when he's riding on the donkey, and when he's speaking peace to the nations, and he's fulfilling that second part of the prophecy, is 2,000 years. So here again, you have a gap of time between, just in a single section of scripture, of one his first coming and the other one his second coming. That's why I tend to lean towards the idea of the day of vengeance. And I'm not saying the 70 AD is not time of vengeance. It is.
For the Jews, it was
for the
definitely
Jews,
time of vengeance.
100%.
And that's the distinguishing factor. There's always an interpretation being made. Like, which time of vengeance do you want to refer to? Do we want to refer to the one that is about to happen within 30 to 40 years, or do we want to refer to the time of vengeance that's going to happen in 2,000 years? Even in that last passage you read about him riding in on a donkey, and what was the second part of that prophecy?
About his rule. Peace, his rule from sea to sea. Mm-hmm.
Even there, people can take it to mean like, well, he did initiate the kingdom to some degree, the kingdom of peace, of repentance, of no more old covenant and the new covenant in his blood. So to some degree, he has instituted a form of peace. And at least for us, because we're in Christ, we get those benefits here and now. It's the now, but not yet, right? We all believe in that.
Yep.
So to some degree, it is fulfilled. And there's a lot of these prophecies, even when he reads and says like, today this has been fulfilled in your midst, right? And then shuts it and doesn't read the second part because it hasn't been fulfilled yet. He's not going out there and like judging right there on the spot so he could fulfill the second part. But there's a lot of these prophecies that in the New Testament get applied to Jesus, right? In the Gospels over and over again, even in the epistles, you'll read where it's like, so that it may be fulfilled what the prophet such and such said. And then you go and read it and you can see how it applies to Jesus, but in the immediate context, nobody thought that it was applying to the Messiah. You know what I'm saying? Like even where the craziest one we read, Dennis, a few weeks ago, was where, is it Ezekiel? Or which prophet is it that's like, this virgin will be with child and you shall name it Emmanuel.
Isaiah 7:14.
Isaiah, okay? Mm-hmm. At that point in time, the people there with Isaiah weren't like, wow, the Messiah is going to be named Emmanuel. They had no idea that it was referring to the Messiah, But I think Matthew is like, and this was done so that it may fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So for me, when I see these instances where it's like, oh, and there's a gap, it could be something like this to me personally, where it's like, hey, it was prophetic, but people didn't know it was, or it's not the way we see it now in hindsight, having the fullness of scripture. You know what I'm saying? Because even with Daniel, I doubt Daniel walked away and was like, man, thank God there's a 2,000-year gap between week 69 and week 70, because so many more people are going to get saved. People didn't even know the Gentiles were going to get saved. You know what I mean? They could have literally just started a freaking clock on a calendar and just like marked to 176,000 whatever days and been like, hey, Messiah's supposed to come like literally today. But they didn't even do that. Like they missed even that. Even Jesus's use of the word or of the term son of man, that comes from Daniel. So the whole time he's walking around on the earth for 3.5 years being like, son of man this, son of man that, son of man, how much more clear can you get that it's talking about Daniel? Like, do you have the calendar with 170,000 check marks? Because I'm the Son of Man. You know what I mean? Anywho, that's my 2 cents. Dennis, if we have any questions along the way,
so he's been answering questions as he's been going.
Perfect.
Which is nice.
So, that's good. That's good because
that works out.
that's kind of the goal.
There's some questions, but it's like a little bit more general, and I don't want to get off this, where this topic is.
Off the flow.
Off the flow. So I want to keep going. What is that? So yeah, okay. I don't want to throw it off either because I know my questions will throw it off too. So where are we now?
So now we've established that there is at least a minimum of a 38-year gap between the time that Jesus arrived and the 69th week got done. Jesus was killed, temple was destroyed, and then we see, so the temple's destroyed and war was determined, which we know historically. And then verse 27.
Before we read that real quick, Mondo, while studying for this and hearing the other sides and stuff, I don't know if it makes sense, but this is one thing that one of the guys I was listening to was saying in 26, in verse 26. I'm going to read it again real quick. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. Okay, so that says after the 62 weeks. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with the flood, and da, 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 da. So he was making the distinction that it just says at a time after the 62 weeks that the city and the sanctuary is destroyed. It doesn't say that on the 62nd week or within the 62nd week or something like that. It just speaks about a time after when that event will happen. Do you see what I'm saying? That kind of clicked with me, that like, hey, it's not being as specific as, hey, on the 62nd week, the Messiah will be killed, which when we actually do the math, right, and count those numbers, as we were talking about earlier, you actually arrive at like the crucifixion according to some of the mathing. So what do you think about that? What do you think about the idea that it might just be referring to a time after the 62 weeks when the sanctuary and the city are destroyed?
Oh, 100%. Totally agree with that because, well,
that makes sense.
Oh yeah, because why? What do we know? There's two things. I'm gonna bring my hands up again.
Just be careful down here.
That's where something's going on. So
don't cat.
Yeah, don't do this. It might see it. From the time of the command, 445 or so, to the arrival of the Messiah is 69 weeks, and then it says. So this is why Sir Robert Anderson described it as his arrival on Palm Sunday, that April 6, 32 AD. But then, so we have he's here. All it says is he's here. But then it says, okay, and once he shows up, that means that 69 weeks is complete and done. So now it's like we're standing here and we're wondering, okay, well, do we start the 70th week now? Sequentially. But it doesn't do that, as we know. But what it does say is there's two things that are going to happen after the 69 weeks are done. Number one, the Messiah is going to be killed. That's the additional phrase. So the 69 weeks ends with the Messiah's arrival or his appearance, I guess. But then you make a stop. After that is over, two things happen. One is the Messiah is killed and the temple's destroyed. So that's why we're looking at it. There's two things that happen. So I 100% agree that there are two things. It doesn't say when. It doesn't say at the time of the ending of the 69 weeks. It simply says afterwards.
Right.
After those are over, two things happen. And so in Sir Robert Anderson's calculations, Jesus was killed roughly 6 days later.
Oh, I see.
And then 38 years later or 40 years later after that is when the temple's destroyed. So
which still fits because both of those events are after the 62 weeks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, dang. That actually makes a lot of sense because now you're back. Now the maths again. And both of those events happen after the 62 weeks.
Yep.
That's an interesting way to take it. So then how does that affect the last 7 weeks. Well, I mean, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Well, so
Or the
let's
last week. The last week.
the
I should
last
say.
week, the last 7 years. So right now we're in this limbo land currently, right? Because we have and this is where I'll bring it up. So we're in this limbo land where we've looked this way and we're like, wow, the 69 weeks is over, but we haven't heard anything yet about this last week. But now I'm here. I saw the Messiah get killed and I saw the temple be destroyed. So now I'm at least at 70 AD. And so does then the 70th week start at 70 AD, which would put us at 77. And then, of course, by the end of 77, the year 77, all those 6 things would have had been accomplished. Atone for iniquity, that did happen. But perpetual righteousness? Well, clearly we haven't been living in perpetual righteousness for the last 1900 years. So, but let me give you the other perspective here, and then you guys could tell me if you think it fits. The other perspective, again, more with those for a covenant theologian or reform, they see the 70th week. It says he'll confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. Okay, let's just take that first phrase of Daniel 9:27. Well, they like to see the continuity. Well, so what they'll say is when Jesus showed up, his ministry, because let me just say this: the last 70th week, this 7-year period is divided into 2 halves, 3.5 and 3.5. How do we know that? Because it says in the middle of the week he'll put an end to the sacrifices and offerings, and then it goes on. So just remember, we have 3.5 and 3.5. So after the 69 weeks is over, Jesus appears, and then what they want to do is they want to see the beginning of that. They see that as the start of Jesus's ministry. So then Jesus comes and he confirms the covenant. Okay, and he spends the first 3.5 years because he has a 3.5-year ministry, and then he dies. So when he dies, according to them, he's confirming the covenant, and he puts an end to sacrifices and offerings.
Mm.
Okay, at his crucifixion. Therefore, the sacrifices aren't needed anymore, theologically speaking, because Jesus is the final sacrifice. Well, we all agree on that. Okay, so this is where they begin to introduce some of these true themes that the book of Hebrews discusses, that Jesus is the end of sacrifices. Now, he's the fulfillment, we'll say it that way.
Sure.
Hebrews 10:4, the blood of bulls and goats could never take away sin. So, but here's the challenge. So, what about if you ask them, well, what about the last 3.5 years? Because remember, okay, now Jesus died, he was resurrected, and then he ascends into heaven. Well, what about the last 3.5 years of that 7? Remember, of the 7. So the last 70th week, 3.5 years, he comes and he dies. And the last 3.5, they go, well, that's symbolic. Whoa, wait a minute. Now you're introducing symbolism? You're taking the first 3.5 years of that 70th week to be literal.
Yeah.
Jesus had a literal 3.5-year ministry, and then he died. And now you're making the last 3.5 years symbolic until the end of time?
Why is the last 3.5 have to be symbolic?
Because because here's why. If they take it literal, then if Jesus died in 33, you add 3.5 years, what do you get? You get the year 36 and a half. The 70 weeks of Daniel are over. Now what?
So you're saying that if the 69 weeks leads up to, where were we? Like 32 AD?
Let's just say, well, for them, they don't agree with that. But for them, they will bring it to basically the baptism of Jesus. So let's say that's 29 AD. So for them, for the covenant theologian people or the people that see as sequential, they don't see a gap. Remember, these people don't like a gap. So they're not even going to agree to the gap about the temple being destroyed in 70 AD as that being a gap. They're going to say, no. These are sequential. It says from the time of the command to rebuild the city until the Messiah arrives is 69. And then the 70th week starts, and the first 3.5 years
is his ministry.
Is the ministry, and that's the first half of the 70th week, the last 7 years.
Sacrifices are cut off
at his death.
Because he's sacrificed.
He's sacrificed.
And then the latter 3.5 years Well, okay. Well, hold on. We didn't read it. Okay. This might help. 8, verse 27. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. And for half of the week, he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wings of abominations shall come one who makes desolate until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. Okay, so based on this is where we're getting these 3.5 years, or these 2 3.5 year sections, right? That in the first 3.5 years, which some might say is Christ's ministry, 3.5 years, and then that puts an end to sacrifices once he's cut off, once he's killed, because he is the perfect sacrifice. Then couldn't you just say that this latter part of verse 27 is the second 3.5 weeks, and on the wings of abominations shall come who make desolate until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator? Wouldn't that be?
So,
well, I guess that didn't happen within 3.5 years.
No, it didn't. See, so this is the problem. That's what I was saying. If you let the text just read like you just did, you let it speak to your soul, right? And you're like, well, wait a minute.
Ben doesn't have a soul.
Oh, he's got a soul. So
hey,
if Jesus, let's say that 29 AD is when that 7-year, 70th week, that last one started. So if you add 7 years, that's going to put you around the year 36.
Anything special happen around that time?
36. I don't think anything special happens, but I wonder if, because listen, realistically, it is quite coincidental that Christ's ministry is about 3.5 years, that at the end of that 3.5 years, we do believe he made an end to sacrifices. There's no need for them anymore. They're meaningless. And then I wonder if the latter 3.5 years is, I don't know. I wonder if they're just rounding up in the prophecy just to make it work. 77s, or wait, no.
Listen.
Yeah, 77, 490 years. Instead of 489.5 or 86.5,
Well, what we know is that Gabriel gave this 173,880 day prophecy of the 483 years specifically to the exact day. So to say that we went from specificity to the nth degree, probability is amazing, mathematical prophecy, to, well, he's just rounding up now. That's a little hard for me.
I'm being facetious.
I know. I'm just saying that's hard for me.
It is. What about from like a dispensational or a futurist perspective, where you have to account for the fact that, again, Christ's ministry is 3.5 years and then is cut off, and he does put an end to sacrifices, which, interestingly enough, this would be the section that gets gapped out into the future, into some end times eschatological stuff, even though it was technically somewhat fulfilled, right? So now we've come down to at least in the I guess partial preterist perspective, or the people that think that most of this was fulfilled. Well, I guess most of it was fulfilled. Now we've got a question of 38 years or 3.5 years, right? Like those are maybe the 3.5 years is symbolic of 38 years. Boom. And now everybody's happy.
That's I
did it.
If I was near you, I'd give you a big air hug, and then you.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Okay.
Someone just wrote. Hang on 1 second. Someone just wrote, I'm going to have to rewatch with a calculator at hand. And paper also in slow motion.
Yes. So if you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I said.
No, he said.
Yeah, I agree.
This is what's hard with numbers. Like, this is literally why we need a whiteboard, and we could like show it and display it. But go ahead, Mondo. Oh, you did it. You you kiddied.
You kidded.
Are you good?
I think
now it's muted. Now it's active.
Yeah. Well, it didn't show it as muted. That's weird. Okay. So something's going on. It keeps telling me that there's been a disconnect or something. And the enemy
Oh,
had me saying he's really trying to
it's
get.
okay. If you ever see me do this, you know what I'm referring to.
Okay, that's good to know. All right. So the reason that we're having this struggle between sacrifices and offering and symbolism is because we actually didn't really address the text. And I think once we actually address the text of verse 27, we've been operating under the theory of the partial preterist is that the one who stops the sacrifices is Jesus because of his own sacrifice. Okay, so in Hebrew, this is you could read in English, it doesn't matter, but it's clear in the English even there's an important pronouns. Okay, this is, I mean, for all of our friends out there, our woke friends, pronouns are important. Okay,
He, him.
he or him, right? So this is a he him moment for Daniel 9, because notice what it says in verse 27. It's introducing now this person who is making the covenant for 1 week for the last 7 years. And what it says, and I did a lot on this in a separate presentation. Literally in Hebrew, this is a very, I can nerd out with you if you want, because the Hebrew word here, gavar, only appears twice in this very specific Hebrew form, the hifil form, in the whole Bible. Okay, so you're like, oh wow, that's important. So what it appears in Psalm 12. Very, very specific. And what it says is, and he will cause to prevail a covenant with the many, or for the many is literally what it says, for the many for 7 years. Okay. So the question is, who is he? Is it Jesus? Which again is what kind of the Reformed people want, because they see it as a connection between Jesus' 3.5-year ministries, which you said, well, it's kind of coincidental. Well, I agree, but coincidence doesn't mean that it's true, because who is the he? Well, if we look in the context, the last person mentioned, who's the last person mentioned? It's not talking about the Messiah. It says in verse 26, and after the 62 weeks, the anointed one shall be cut off and have nothing. Okay, there's a guy mentioned. And the people of the prince who is to come shall come and destroy the city of the sanctuary. That's the last guy mentioned, is the prince who is going to come. Okay. The people, here's the question for us. The people of the prince who is coming shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Which people destroyed the city and the sanctuary?
Rome.
Rome. The prince is Roman. The people of the prince who's going to come is going to destroy the city and the sanctuary. The prince is Roman. And then the next, it goes on and talks about desolations. And then it says, and he, who's he? The Roman prince will cause the covenant to prevail for Israel. The word for the many, la rabim, it appears in Daniel 11:33. It's the only place it appears in Daniel, very specific in Hebrew. It refers to the Jewish people. So literally, it says he. Who's he? The antecedent, the last guy mentioned. It's not the anointed one. The last guy mentioned, according to normal grammar rules, when you have a pronoun, it's talking about the previous mention. The Roman prince who's coming. He's not there. He's coming. When the Roman prince comes, he will cause the covenant to prevail for the Jews for 7 years. And you go, oh. So, and he will cause the sacrifices and offerings to cease in the middle of the week after 3.5 years. And then it gives this very interesting phraseology. It says, and on the wing of abominations, which the wing kanaf in Hebrew is this idea of the temple wing. It's a temple precinct. And on the temple precinct, abominations shall come, one who makes desolate, until the decreed and is poured out on the desolator. This is beautiful language, because this idea of the abomination of desolation, it appears here, it appears in Daniel 11, and it also appears in Daniel chapter 12. This is why people will talk about this coming Roman prince is going to commit the abomination of desolation in the middle of the 70th week of Daniel in the future, which is exactly what Matthew 24:15, Jesus says, when you see the abomination of desolation happen in the future, you'll know for the Jews, get out of town when you see this standing in the holy place. So the reason why this is not Jesus ending the sacrifices is because Jesus is not a Roman prince. This is the coming Roman prince. That's why the Sir Robert Anderson book is called The Coming Prince, because he's basing it on Daniel 9:27 and 26. This coming future, in the future, after the temple's destroyed, so after 70 AD, right? Jesus died, in the gap, 70 AD, temple's destroyed. Sometime after that, which we don't know when, this Roman prince is going to show up. He's going to confirm the covenant for the Jewish people for 1 7-year period. Well, what covenant's he talking about? Well, I think he's talking about the Mosaic covenant, because why? It's talking about sacrifices and offerings. The Jews are getting ready to build their temple again and start their sacrifices up again. This is what they want. This is what we've talked about, the red heifer. I've written a book on it, etc. But in the middle of that 7-year period, he's going to stop the sacrifices. That's what it says. He will stop them. And then desolations are determined for the last 3.5 years. And then until the decreed desolation or judgment is poured out on the one who makes desolate, which is the Antichrist, because he's going to commit the abomination of desolation, or the abomination that causes desolation, which is judgment for that last 3.5 years. God is going to pound him to the ground. Well, Jesus is at the end of that 7-year period, and all that judgment is going to be poured out on the desolator, which is what it says. So this is why this whole conversation, or part of the conversation that we've had about, oh, this could be Jesus 3.5 years, and he causes the sacrifices and offering. That's not what it says at all. This is the Roman prince. He's connected with the Roman Empire. How do we know that? Because they're the ones that destroyed the city and the sanctuary. So that being said, please, we're friends here. If you disagree, let me know, because I don't want you just to agree with me. So let's have a little.
I can see both sides. I could see why you're saying, like, hey, the last guy spoken about is specifically it says the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. So it doesn't specifically say the prince will destroy the city, but the people of the prince, which we know it's the Romans, right? Like Titus wasn't there firsthand, like pulling down bricks from the temple, but it was the Roman army, right?
Yep.
But the way that I see this, if I'm assuming that the majority of this, at least up to verse 26, is about Jesus. Is that somewhat fair to say?
Half of 26. The first half.
Bingo.
The
first part of 26, because he's cut off.
An anointed one shall be cut off, and he shall have nothing. That's Jesus, and that's where it ends, talking about Jesus, the way I'm reading it. Yep. And the people of the prince, I think Jared Kushner, who is to come shall destroy the city.
Okay, but I mean, the subject of this prophecy is Jesus. For the most part, everything else is details to me.
It's who's the prince though? Who's the people of the prince? Who are the people of the prince? Who are the people who support? Which prince is this?
I understand, but that's a detail within the context of an entire prophecy. Okay, let me qualify this real quick. So let me start at the beginning. 70 weeks are declared for about your people and the holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for iniquity, to bring everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, to anoint a most holy one, right? Or place. Those 6 things, a lot of the New Testament uses that kind of language when referring to Jesus, right? So think about Jesus real quick as I list those one more time. Mm-hmm. To finish transgression. Has he paid for our sins, been the final sacrifice for us? Yes. Has he put an end to transgression? Maybe not like that we stop sinning, but before God, has he put an end to transgression for us?
Yes, like it is finished.
Right?
Well, hold on a minute. Let me just interrupt.
Okay.
It's we definitely want to keep Jesus center. Amen.
I think all prophecies are about Jesus.
Agreed. Okay, agreed. But we also don't want to violate the text. This is, let's keep the first thing that it says. Even Jesus is involved. Okay, there's many things that are involved here. Jesus is involved. The Romans are involved. This coming prince is involved. Decrees are being involved. The point is not specifically about Jesus. Now, again, just trust me here, because why? This is about the holy city and the Jewish people. So here's my question. Today, right now, in Jerusalem, is transgression ended? Oh, go to Jerusalem, man. Are the Jewish people living with transgression? Oh, yes. They are in massive rebellion against God. We know this. Exactly. It's the gay capital of the Middle East. So what it's saying is, by the time these 70 weeks are completed, all of them, God is going to fix all of these 6 things that you're mentioning, not for Christians. We're not the focus of this prophecy.
Right. This is about the Jews and the city.
Jews, yes. And they're in a complete state of rebellion against God right now. There's transgression. Now, atonement has been made for them, but they are not participating in it. Okay, as we know, for the most part, there's some Jews that are saved, praise God. But this is not about Christians and what we experience in the New Testament. The context is about the Jews, he says it, and the holy city. The holy city right now in Jerusalem is an abomination. So let's not make it about us when the context doesn't do that, even though we understand that, again, what I would say is, when Jesus returns, and I think it's that this 7-year period is the future, when he returns by the end and solves this, all the Jews are going to be saved. Jerusalem's going to be cleansed. The new temple, the holy place or the anointed place is going to be renewed. All these things are going to be accomplished by the end when Jesus comes back for the Jewish people and for the holy city. And then, of course, by extension, the rest of the world. But so I hope you understand, if we make this about us and what's happening in the New Testament, then we've taken it out of context.
Oh, shoot. Hold on. Let me click this button to make sure I don't cancel this. Hold on. Changes made. Cancel. Oh, thank God. Guys, I'm clicking tabs over here. I almost shut the whole thing down.
Oh
I almost kiddied.
You froze up. You froze up.
I did, huh? Okay.
Yeah, you did.
Thank God. Hey, so when I say I think Jesus is the main subject here, I say that because I literally believe all prophecies are about Jesus. Sure, there's stuff about like land, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'll find the verse and I'll pull it up and read it for you. But in the meantime, let me just go down this list. This is from other people that I've been watching and reading today. Okay. And I love that you said that this isn't about us first and foremost here, right? Because it's dealing with what he said. It's for your people and your holy city. First and foremost, it's about the Jewish people and about Jerusalem. You know what I'm saying? That's why even at the end where it's like, yeah, and then 2,000 years later, that's a very like Western evangelical interpretation of this. But I don't think the Jewish people walked away thinking that it was 2,000 years later. I don't think Daniel walked away thinking it was 2,000 years later. But let me just go through this for a few minutes. Okay, bear with me. So when it says, in this list of 6 things at the beginning, when it says finish transgression or make an end to transgression, pull up Matthew 23:29. Okay. This is an idea of how he finished transgression, or they finished transgression at this point in time in the 490-year prophecy. So Matthew 23:29. Yeah.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the monuments of the righteous.
Oh, okay. Keep going. Sorry. Here, I'll read it. Decorate the tombs of the righteous, saying, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have taken part with them in the shedding the blood of the prophets. Thus, you witness against yourselves that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your fathers. So when it says, let me pull it up. To finish the transgression, a specific transgression. And then Jesus tells them, go ahead and do what your fathers did, which is kill me, the final prophet. That is a filling up of the transgression of the Jews. They did this all the time. They were the ones that received the prophets. They were the ones that received the law, right? So they were held to a higher standard. Nobody else killed the prophets of God. No, none of the other nations. It was always only the Jews. So when they killed Jesus, the final prophet, the actual Messiah, that they could have just checked the calendar boxes for 170,000 days or whatever it is, that can be seen as a filling of the transgression, or as Daniel specifically puts it, finishing the transgression. And then after that transgression is finished, lo and behold, 38 years later, they're judged entirely, right? Put an end to sin. Dennis, if you want to pull up Hebrews 29, 25 through 26. And then, okay. And then hush it. Let me see. Mondo, do you want to pull up 2 Corinthians 5:19? Dude, that way we could just read them off.
Hebrews what? There's no Hebrews 29.
Hebrews 9:25.
Dyslexic.
Hebrews 9:25 through 26. Yeah.
Nor was it to offer himself repeatedly, as the high priest enters the holy places every year with blood not his own. For then he would have had to suffer repeatedly since the foundation of the world. But as it is, he has appeared once for all at the end of the ages to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. So he put away sin by his death.
Once and for all, one sacrifice, sin is done. Doesn't mean we stop sinning, you know what I mean? But it's the now, not yet. He has dealt with our sin, past, present, future. So when it says put an end to sin, this might be what it's talking about. Because Mondo, do you agree with the statement? Do you think the New Testament interprets the Old Testament?
Well, I would say that yes, but it doesn't reinterpret it.
Not reinterpret, but it tells us what it actually meant, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it gives us. I guess I'm a very strong believer in the continuity between the old and the new, and there's no contradiction. And so, even in the New Testament, when we read something, it gives us more. It gives us more understanding of the seed that was planted, certainly in the Old Testament, for sure. I have no problem with that.
And so this is why, to me, like finding these kinds of passages in the New Testament, which tell us how this here maybe, I'm applying it to this as a proof text. It doesn't tell us here in Daniel, hey, check out 2 Corinthians 5:19, but it uses specific language. And I think that God's intentional with that. You know what I mean? So I don't think that it's wrong to look at what the New Testament says about these 6 things and see that they're actually in the New Testament said to be fulfilled by Christ. You know what I mean? Not everybody might agree. They might be saying that it's fulfilled in a different way because check out Jerusalem now. They're still full of transgression and it's the gay capital of the world and stuff like that. But do you see how I'm connecting New Testament dots to this Old Testament prophecy? Do you think
it's symbolic? You're saying it's symbolic, though. You're doing what the partial preterists are doing.
I'm saying it's symbolic,
right? Aren't you with verse 24?
Did Jesus put an end to sin?
No, he did it. Maybe not. Well, yeah, it's symbolic, but it's also it means differently instead of literal. It's not literal. Well, it is literal.
But what do you mean? It is literal.
It is literal, but it's not. They use the word symbolic, but I don't know if I agree with that. More just spiritual, I guess. Literal and spiritual instead of future literal only. It's literal and spiritual instead.
Sure, but how is we are the seed of Abraham if we have faith, How is that
Yeah.
not a spiritual thing?
No,
This is what I
I'm just
mean.
saying
The
what
New
you're doing is what the
Testament.
partial predecessors are doing, preterists, whatever, are doing. I think that's what you're agreeing with them.
Okay, but I don't think it's fair to say that it's what did you say? Symbolic?
Yeah, I don't like the word symbolic. I would say
No, not that.
spiritual, literal and spiritual at the same time.
But those are the two realities we exist in,
Yeah, no,
and I
I
think a
know.
lot of time
I'm
God
okay with
sees
that.
our reality through spiritual lens. In
Yeah,
the same
here's
way, we're called descendants of Abraham by
right.
faith,
I get it,
even
but
though
the
we're
hiccup
not.
is the city, the people in your city. Well, the holy city. Where's the holy city? So we have to define that. If we're going to take to finish the transgression, so the next 6 things, if we're going to take them as literal and spiritual, then how do we define the holy city? So
I mean, it's Jerusalem.
70
What?
weeks.
What?
Yeah, but what is that literal and spiritual? You're talking physical, literal. But if you're going to take the rest of them as spiritual and literal only,
Well, that's the thing. I don't think it's spiritual and literal. These things are literally fulfilled in Christ. So you're saying it's spiritual, but putting an end to sin is a spiritual thing.
sure.
You know what I mean? Atoning for iniquity, that's a spiritual thing.
Right. But what Mondo's talking about is the transgression is still here. So it's not fulfilled yet.
To finish the transgression. Which transgression?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm
You
not
see what I'm
arguing
saying?
you. I'm actually in the middle kind of because the way I'm reading it is kind of how you're trying to explain it right now. You're trying to match it where you're matching New Testament with these 6 things, right? And showing how Jesus fulfilled all of these 6 things
we
in his
agree.
death and resurrection.
Jesus is the Messiah spoken of here, right? Nobody
Right.
disagrees with that. So when it lists these 6 things that are going to be done by whom? Whether now or in 2,000 years, or I'm sorry, whether in AD 30 or in 2,000 years, it's still going to be done by Christ, right?
Well, it was done at the cross. I mean, if you want to get
That's what I mean.
you know,
That's what I
yeah.
mean. So whether it was done in 33 or so AD or in the coming 2,000 years, well, today, it's still done by Christ, So it doesn't take away. This isn't like it's not a me or a Mondo thing. We both believe Jesus does these things. It's just a matter of when did he do them or when will he do it?
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying? And here
Yeah.
in the New Testament, the verses I'm using all claim that he did these things already.
Mhm.
They were already done on the cross. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
Um,
What do you think
go ahead,
about that?
Mondo.
One?
Well, I would say that if we get to the other ones, there's no doubt that what again, the context, Jesus is the agent, clearly, but he is the agent specifically for the Jewish people in the holy city here. There's no discussion at all about Gentiles. There's no discussion about all the ramifications, even though we know that of course later
Sure.
Isaiah 49 talks about salvation going to all the Gentiles. So it's not unheard of in the Old Testament for them to believe that Gentiles are going to be saved and be brought in.
I mean,
sure.
the promise to Abraham was
Absolutely
to all the nations, right? All the nations will be blessed in you.
Yep. So we're all in agreement on that. I think that the key is to keep the Jewish people and the holy city, because right now what the point is that. So I'll say it this way: Daniel is being told that after the 70 weeks are fully complete, whatever that looks like, the agent, Jesus the Messiah, will have accomplished all these things for the Jewish people in the holy city. And so the problem that we have is, and this is the difficulty, because if you look at it from a future perspective, by the time that Jesus returns and fulfills these, all of these things will clearly be specifically fulfilled for the Jewish people. Because right now, when you say the transgression, the word transgression in Hebrew is one of these, it's kind of like, this is just normal. Let's say I have it in all languages, but it's this idea of a singular collective, where the transgression is not necessarily a single transgression, because the Jews are still in Jerusalem transgressing against Jesus. Okay, so that's certainly not solved yet.
Yeah,
sure.
I was just connecting it to the killing of the prophets, because when it says to finish the transgression, it could, I mean, it could easily say to finish transgressions, you know, if it wanted to
Yeah.
put an end to all sin
Well,
or all
during the
transgression.
during the coming tribulation period, the Jewish people are going to be involved with a lot of persecution, and they're going to be 100% in agreement with the killing of a lot of Christians and other prophets, including, I believe, the two witnesses, okay, that are killed in the future. And so
Mm.
when you think about the transgression, if I just read them really quick here, like you were doing, to finish transgression for the Jewish people in the holy city, well, that's not done yet. Jesus has paid for it to end sin. Well, certainly sin hasn't ended it for the Jewish people and Jerusalem. Atoning for iniquity, we know that Jesus accomplished that. Its application hasn't been applied to all the Jewish people yet and the city. To bring in everlasting righteousness, well, there's no doubt that within the church we have a fruit of righteousness, but it certainly, Jerusalem is not a beacon of righteousness by any means, and the Jewish people are clearly not bringing in everlasting righteousness. And to authenticate vision and prophecy, we know that to authenticate vision and prophecy is to wrap it up. Well, we know that there's so many prophecies yet that have not been authenticated and wrapped up.
Is it to wrap up or to confirm?
Well, it depends on your. This says to seal both vision and prophecy. You could look at a variety of.
I read it as confirming vision and prophet.
Right.
And so when you said wrapped up, that changed it for me a little bit.
Well, the sense is this idea that it comes to its fulfillment by the end of the 70 weeks. The fulfillment of these prophecies concerning Jerusalem and the holy people will come to this confirmation. But right now, there's all these prophecies, even in the New Testament, Romans 11, 25 and 26, all Israel will be saved. That's a prophecy of the future. Well, we don't see that happening yet, but by the end of the 70th week, that'll be true. That will be true.
I see what you're saying. And it comes down to, I think the main difference here is when you say that this isn't accomplished yet for the Jewish people, I think it is accomplished for the Jewish people as long as they're in Christ. In the same way it's accomplished for us, for the church, if they're in the church, then it's accomplished for them. If they're not in the church, then it's not accomplished for them. It doesn't matter if they're Jew, Gentile, Egyptian, it doesn't matter. So if it's accomplished for us, then it's accomplished for them.
Hold on a minute. There's some major sound going on. Can you talk a little bit?
Yeah. Sorry. Is it on my end? Yikes. Dennis, are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. Oh man.
It's on Mondo's end?
I could hear it through his headphones.
Satana.
Yeah. It's the enemy.
Mondo, do you got to reconnect or something? Or is it better?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Whenever you guys talk, it is like this massive scream, hiss, really weird out of nowhere.
I promise we prayed before this, so it's.
You should restart. You
want to reconnect? Hey, disconnect
and come back.
I'm gonna message him real quick to disconnect and reconnect. Can you hear us, Mondo? No, he can't hear us. Hey, check your phone.
Can you remove him from the thing and then?
Oh, good idea. Good idea. Hold on. How do I remove?
You just did.
Okay. No, don't ban. Kick. Should I kick him? Kick. No, I'm gonna kick. No, don't kick. Okay. No, hold on. Let me message him first.
Okay. Sorry, guys. This is just proof that I think these conversations are really important. I wouldn't say salvific.
Wait. Let me put him back. Okay, he left and he's going to come back in.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't say these are salvific issues necessarily, but they do shape, what we're thinking. And I like what you're doing, Ben, how you're.
Bro, you yelled at me.
No,
that hurt my feelings.
No,
I don't think you've ever disagreed with me so much in your life.
Can you hear us? I was actually trying to confirm how I was reading it because exactly.
Can you hear us, Mondo?
Yeah, everything's back.
Okay,
it was like this massive. Oh my heavens!
The enemy. Yeah. The enemy.
I was telling Dennis that I can't believe he yelled at me. This is the most he's ever disagreed with me in his whole life.
I wasn't even disagreeing. I was coming across in a bad way. It's a long day.
Well, let me say something because right before the thing came off was 100% in agreement that for those Jews in Jesus, this is the this is the Romans 11 theology that um, where Paul is talking about that there is an elect. Those are his words. People don't write to me about predestination. Okay, this is his words. There are an elect within the Jewish people that are participating in the covenant right now, for sure. But
A remnant.
a remnant, exactly. And he says, and the rest were blinded for a period of time, partially blinded, not all of them, until that day in the future when all Israel will be saved. And so I think the challenge that we have here is even the remnant that we see being saved through Jesus, their Messiah, of course, that itself does not fulfill the full promises that you have, I think, in here, because the other thing that you have, if we look at that last section, is it talks about sealing up vision and all the prophecy, everlasting eternal righteousness, and anointing the most holy place. And it really you can look this up, but the Hebrew here has behind it the idea in all of the other places that it appears in the Bible, referring not to a person but to a thing, to a place. So, and if you look at what this, I would say this theology that you find here is in so much agreement um, with the fullness of the Jews getting saved. Again, Romans 11, 25 and 26, all Israel will be saved. Jesus is cleaning up of all of the defiled temple, building a brand new temple, Ezekiel 40 through 48. And so all of those things specifically were in Jerusalem. So right now, I would say how many Jews, even Messianic Jews, are living in Jerusalem? If you go to Jerusalem, the holy city is everlasting righteousness is not prevailing from there. So I don't think it's just because if you had 3 Messianic Jews living in the city of Jerusalem that, well, this is fulfilled. It's way bigger than that. This is like universal language, not just a few. And so Jerusalem truly is not the city of righteousness. Jeremiah 23, you have all these other passages where Jerusalem itself will be called the city of righteousness, which is not the case. And I think that all those other passages in Jeremiah and others speaking about that prophetic development certainly will be fulfilled when Jesus comes back and returns. So I think there's no doubt, as we said, there's a variety of viewpoints here. But when I stack the pros and cons of all of them, the future fulfillment of what we see in that last 70 week, again, because I think that the prince, this is the prince of the Romans who's going to be making the covenant anyway. He's going to stop the sacrifices and offering. He's going to get the judgment put on him when he desolates everything. By the time that happens in the future, and when Jesus comes back and obliterates him, check, 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 check. And then there's no like, well, is it really referring? It's going to be so obvious, so universal in its application and fulfillment that it's going to go, oh yeah, that clearly there's no similarities between it being fulfilled universally and then having it fulfilled individually through a few Jewish people maybe living in Jerusalem, if that's what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that too. If you believe in a literal like millennial reign of Christ, right? Then some of these things will be fulfilled then too, because we know there's still going to be sin. We know there's still going to be transgression. You know what I mean? So even in that interpretation, still this doesn't get necessarily fulfilled literally until new heaven, new earth, no more sin. You know?
I think the other, what you see though, this is what I would say, is because I think that's a fair question. I've had the same question. Is like, okay, Lord, what are you meaning here? And so what we do see in the millennium though is that transgression. Some theologians will teach, and I think there's some evidence for this, that during the millennial period, remember these things are Jewish. They're not about Gentiles in the millennium. They're about Jews and the holy city. So at that time when Jesus comes and he starts the millennium, many teachers will say that all Israel will be saved, Romans 11, and that all the Jews from that point forward will be saved, and therefore they will be living in transgression as it relates to, like you mentioned earlier, maybe a specific transgression of the Messiah. That's going to be over and done with. Sin as a dominating influence will be over, because right now sin dominates, but it's not going to dominate. That's kind of this is where you see in other points of scripture, Hosea, Micah, that righteousness is going to fill the world from as the ocean covers the earth. You think, wow, that's going to be so during the millennium. Even though we know that there are going to be individual Gentiles or people in their non-glorified bodies ruling or living, Satan's gone. So external temptation, there's still going to be sin in the unredeemed parts of man. But what's the characterization? Righteousness everywhere. So this is where it harmonizes all those passages. But if we said, well, come on, Lord, if there's righteousness everywhere, there's still going to be sinners over there. So we have this, we do have a tension in scripture where you have the lack of specificity that honestly I would want. But scripture we know is still 100% true. So it's obviously in order to reconcile what we perceive potential contradictions, we recognize that God is using it in ways that will still be 100% literally fulfilled, but in ways that we're not necessarily wanting it to be forced in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, listen, from both perspectives, we've both got a way to read this list of 6 things that will be accomplished within this 490-year period. Okay. That, well, actually, I guess not within the 490-year period, because one has a 38-year gap and the other has a 2,000-year gap. So either way, both sides don't math with 490 years. But both of us, or both perspectives, have a way of dealing with these 6 things in how they're being fulfilled. You know, one is on the cross. It's arguable that these things have been fulfilled. And the other is that in the millennial kingdom, these things will be fulfilled. Is that fair?
Yeah. The only thing I would clarify is that the gap, whether it's 38 years or 2000, what it's saying is that by the time that 70th week ends, these things will have been accomplished. And so to me, I guess it depends on where people, like when we say 38 years, I don't think you're saying that the last 7-year period ends in 70 AD, right? I don't think that's what you're saying, is it?
Say that again.
What and I guess I don't want to say what you believe or not, but in another perspective, they have the gap. The last 7-year period for them ends. It has to end around 36 AD. So they don't really have a way to the temple being destroyed. It's outside of the whole 70-week prophecy altogether. The 70 weeks prophecy altogether, where if the other one is like, well, the 7-year period is after 70 AD. So does it start in 70 AD and then it ends in 77? So that still would be ending almost, 2,000 years ago, where from my perspective, this future 7-year period, these things are left unopen-ended. They are not fulfilled yet to me at all. I mean, you have Jesus's payment, which I think here's the other thing too. You asked about the New Testament. In biblical theology, Daniel, every book of the Bible, when Daniel's writing or Isaiah's writing or any book, when I'm reading Daniel 9:27, I should not have to read Thessalonians to understand Daniel, because Daniel's writing in his own. Everything he's writing about in Hebrew is very specific. It's in it. He's writing a theme, boom, step by step by step. So this is typical hermeneutics, where I can come in, and this is often the case. Well, I'll take Paul and I'll say, Daniel, you don't know what you're talking about. What you really meant was what Paul said you meant. Well, that's really horrible exegesis. Now, I don't think Paul is ever going to take Daniel out of context at all, ever. I don't think Matthew is going to take anybody out. Even if you study, I could send you like a PhD dissertation on this. Even Isaiah 7:14, the virgin shall conceive and bring forth, as being assigned to the house of David, Ahaz. Okay, one of my buddies, his PhD dissertation was on this, and he shows that clearly this is a reference to the virgin Messiah. This is not a reference to anything that's happening necessarily to the king there at that time. And so when Matthew says,
oh, interesting.
Oh, 100%. So this was fulfilled. This was fulfilled. This was done in order to fulfill what Isaiah wrote. That's not Matthew reinterpreting Isaiah at all.
So
There's
there wasn't a maiden who gave birth who named the child Emmanuel in the
not
time of
a virgin.
Ahaz?
Not a virgin.
Oh,
Absolutely not.
virgin. No, but I mean, virgin means young maiden.
No,
You know,
it absolutely does not.
really, some
No.
translations will say maiden.
Yep. And this is I can give you a whole bunch of Hebrew studies on that too, where the Hebrew word is betula, and if you look at all the context of betula, it is not a young maiden. That's a totally different. That's nar. That's a whole different word that's being used there. And to even prove it is in 250 BC, when the Septuagint was being translated, they used the word Parthenos, which is unattested, virgin only. This woman like hasn't had sex. And so when you look at the etymology of both Betula and Parthenos, it is referring to a virgin, a woman, clearly as we would say today, a virgin, not just a young maiden. And so when you look at, again, I can send it to you. So this is where many times there's accusations that the New Testament will reinterpret. That's why when I said what I said, do you believe it interprets? I believe it can provide a commentary, but it never reinterprets out of context what has happened in the Old Testament, clearly. And there's so many great books on the New Testament use of the Old Testament, and I have a whole half a dozen of them, which is very important because of the ways that the writers will use this. So in that sense, that's why I'm reluctant. I agree 100% the New Testament about atonement, but what we're doing now is we're taking the writers of the Hebrews or Paul when it speaks of reconciliation or these other things, and now we're forcing it on Daniel a little bit.
I don't mean to say that it reinterprets the Old Testament. What I mean is it clarifies the Old Testament, because Old Testament, first off, Old Testament audiences, readers, teachers, and they had their own ideas of what the text is saying, and it could also be wrong, just like us. We have our own ideas of what the text can be saying and interpretation, and we can be wrong. You know what I'm saying? And for example, I'll give you the clearest example: the Pharisees.
Right.
Did the Pharisees get things wrong?
Clearly.
Obviously, right?
Yep.
But guess what? They had the law, the prophets, the Torah. They had the whole Old Testament, and they had an interpretive system and a religious system that they created, which has nothing to do with what God actually wanted for his people. And hence Jesus comes and critiques the whole thing and then judges them for it, right? He literally tells them, you hold the keys to the kingdom, but you're not getting in and you're not letting other people get in. How crazy is that?
Yeah.
But they thought they were doing what the text tells them to do. Obviously they were wrong, you know? So
let me jump in really quick, because someone commented what Chuck Missler said, that the New Testament reveals what the Old Testament conceals.
Yeah, I mean that too, but I don't think it's unfair to say or inaccurate to say that the New Testament clarifies the Old Testament, you know? So for example, more clarity, everything Jesus did in terms of being crucified and this and that, nobody really expected that. They thought he was going to be a Roman. He was going to kick out the Romans. They thought he was going to be a king that brings Israel into this new age of rule over the world, which is actually what the millennial kingdom is kind of about, you know? It seems like, I've said this before, it seems like the dispensational side of things kind of leans, I don't mean this to sound like mean, but like literally it believes the same things about the millennial kingdom that the Pharisees thought the Messiah was going to introduce for the Jewish people. They thought they were going to bring Jewish rule over the world, that they would release them of all their oppressors, that they would have, they go further and say that all the wealth of the world is going to be aggregated under the Jewish people. You know what I mean? But it sounds like the millennial kingdom according to dispensationalism, sounds very similar to like what the Pharisees actually expected from their interpretation of the Old Testament, you know? So when I say the New Testament clarifies the Old, I'm saying things about the Messiah are clarified in the New Testament, which were not understood properly by the audience reading the Old Testament for millennia. It clarifies things about the descendants of Abraham, right? All the passages in the New Testament saying that by faith we too are descendants of Abraham. So it's no longer just this nation. According to the New Testament, it's the people of faith, and faith has always been what makes you a descendant of Abraham. Even Abraham, by faith, it was counted to him as righteousness. There was no Israel for him to be a part of. You know what I'm saying? So it's things like that, even like categorical clarifications, like, hey, faith makes you a descendant of Abraham, not blood. There's no special blood. It's about faith. Because otherwise, here's the irony: the blood relatives, the blood descendants of Abraham who are chosen don't have faith and are going to hell. That's weird. Then what are they chosen for? You know? But that's a whole other topic. That's a whole other topic.
that is a whole other topic.
Um,
Well, let me a clarification in that the Pharisees, you said it exactly right. They created their traditions. We know Mark 7, Matthew 15. Jesus challenged the tradition of the elders.
they remind me of the Catholics. The Catholics took something true and made it into this whole other thing that it was never supposed to be.
That's perfect.
That's what they remind me of.
When a few years ago in 2017, I was pastoring and I gave a couple sermons on the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. Okay, in the 2017 versus 1517, and one of the things that I described in there was that the Catholic Church took the truth, the Word of God, and they created this bloated, institutionalized body of religion. Okay?
Just like the Pharisees.
Just like the Pharisees. It's exact language I used. I said, when Jesus came on the scene, what did he encounter? He encountered this bloated, institutionalized religious system based on with all these incrustations of these other non-scriptural things. It's the same thing that the reformers were trying to fight against in 1517. But what I would say though is if you look at the writings in the first century, because there are some, you just got to be in the movement. There are some rabbinic writings where it was very clear that one of the reasons why the Pharisees believed in a conquering Messiah is because the Bible teaches it. So in this sense, it's not that they didn't understand the Old Testament. Let me carefully say this. It's that they were selective in Judaism.
Oh, sure.
Right? They had a Messiah ben David, a conquering Messiah, which Isaiah 63, Isaiah 61, there's a whole bunch of passages talking about this Messiah figure that's going to conquer the world. So they were right to believe that. But they also had a Messiah ben Joseph, the Isaiah 53 suffering Messiah. And so they saw two different Messiahs, where we understand it's just two different companies of comings of the same person. So what they did is at the time, they rejected Jesus because they were selective in their application of Old Testament theology, refusing to accept him coming to die. And so in one sense, they weren't wrong. They were wrong in what they denied. They weren't wrong in what they affirmed. They were affirming a conquering Messiah, which again is true. That, as you said, that's the millennial period, and that's all based on Old Testament scripture, where the Messiah is going to rule. This is Daniel chapter 2, where that coming kingdom is going to destroy all these Gentile kingdoms, Babylon, etc., and then that kingdom will extend to the whole earth. We see this in Isaiah 7:14, Isaiah 9:6-7, talking about unto us a son is given, a child is born. His kingdom is going to go throughout the whole world. So these are the passages that they're reading, and they're going, well, where's the conquering Messiah? That's what the Bible says. Yes, it does. But it also says that he's going to die as a servant. And so that's the hard part for them. And of course, today the rabbinic Judaism that we get, unfortunately, denies they again they don't see a suffering, still don't see a suffering Messiah, which their own texts say. Isaiah, 53, and all of through the Isaiah servant passages, and so that's very important, and that's why I think for people who are more literal, like myself, I just don't do symbolism, unless the text tells me, right? It's hard for me.
Do you
Um,
think that it's symbolic to understand these 6 things that are supposed to be accomplished in verse 24, Daniel 9:24, these 6 things we've been talking about? Do you think it's symbolic of Christ fulfilling these things on the cross?
well, I think if we look at them one by one, I don't think like to bring in everlasting righteousness or to anoint the most holy place, those weren't necessarily accomplished on the cross. See, but see, here's the hard part though, is there's no doubt that the foundation for all of these things, which I think eventually in the future to be fulfilled, are from the work of Jesus. But I think the challenge and maybe we'll go back. I like the language already, not yet. That what Jesus began, I have no problem saying that Jesus began the fulfillment of all of these things, which will eventually be fulfilled and ultimately be finally fulfilled in the future. I got no problem with that. Of course.
I mean,
Of
just his
course.
statement, "It is finished." I mean, that's clear in
Hmm.
just that statement alone, right? It is finished. Well, what's finished? Because we still see. I mean, the next day, everyone was still sinning, right? The next day, the
Exactly.
transgressions were still there. The next day, there was no end to sin. No, but he did atone for iniquity,
Hmm.
you know.
And
So
in
that was.
context, John 19:30, to telestai, it is finished in Greek. It totally, it's 100% proven. What he literally said was, the debt is paid.
Hmm.
So the debt for sin was paid. Well, that doesn't necessarily that handles the sin, which is what he was doing on the cross, of course. And even then, the debt was paid, but atonement wasn't fully accomplished until the resurrection 3 days later. We know that according to Romans 4:25, that he was delivered up because of our trespasses, but we were justified or declared righteous at the resurrection. And so
Hmm.
this is the interesting thing. So
Hmm.
to me, so Jesus offers up this payment,
Yeah.
and then the angels are going, "Did it work? Did it work? Did God accept it? Just wait, we don't know yet." But when Jesus was raised from the dead, that's proof that God accepted the payment. Now, obviously, God knows all things, but in the sense of the people watching, they're freaking out, going,
Hmm.
"What just happened here? Is this going to be accepted by the Father?" And of course, that's what Romans 4:25 says. He was raised up for our justification, which means justification means to be declared righteous. Boom, done, sealed, delivered. And so, even there, to say it's finished, the payment was finished, but the transaction and the transference of righteousness from Jesus to us was not accomplished yet until the resurrection, and then it was complete. So again, these little,
Yeah. And
you
even
know,
even Romans 3:21, but now apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testified. And that's
mhm,
what Daniel is. Daniel's a prophet,
mhm,
right? So then verse 25, just a couple down. God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the
mhm,
shedding of his blood to be received by faith. He did this to demonstrate his righteousness because in his forbearance he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. He did it to demonstrate his righteousness at the present time so as to be just and the one who justifies
mhm,
those who have faith in Jesus. So in the New Testament, there's a lot of the same language that we see
mhm,
here, and it talks about this present time, his sacrifice, clearly the cross, his righteousness, his atonement, his all of these things, which Daniel in this same prophecy talks about the Messiah being cut off.
mhm,
So crucifixion seems to be one of the things that's very important, or the death of the Messiah seems to be one of the things that's very important in this prophecy.
mhm,
And in a way, the New Testament reveals that those 6 things were accomplished in one of the actions Daniel prophesies about. And then even the sealing up of prophecy, or what does it specifically say? That last one, to seal both vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy one or holy place.
Holy
We know Jesus is the anointed one, right? Like we can pull up that passage too. But the sealing up of prophecy, this one of the guys I was listening to earlier was saying that this language of sealing up doesn't necessarily mean to like put an end to it, right? Because check out the New Testament. It talks a ton about prophecy, and it says that in those times prophecy will increase even, right? So sometimes this idea of sealing up prophecy is referring to like validating it or confirming it, you know? So there's a passage in Luke, let me see, Luke 21:2. I'm sorry, 21 verse 2. Is that right there? Yeah. So Luke 21 verse, I'm sorry, 22. Boom. Well, actually, let me start in 20, because this also talks about the abomination of desolation. Once again, Daniel. And so does Matthew 24, where I believe you were saying that the abomination, that desolation, is the Antichrist, the future fulfillment of Daniel 27, or I'm sorry, Daniel 9:27.
Yes, Jesus said in Matthew 24:15, where when you see it standing in the holy place, then the Jews need to flee as quick as they can.
So do you think Luke 21 and Matthew 24 are talking about that same thing?
Go ahead and read it.
Okay, so Luke 21:20. When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those in the city get out, and let those in the country not enter the city. For this is the time of punishment in fulfillment of all that has been written. Now, I'm sorry, how dreadful it will be in those days, pregnant women, and yada, yada, yada. They will fall by the sword, blah, blah, blah. And then Matthew 24:15. So when you see standing in the holy place, the abomination that causes desolation spoken of through the prophet Daniel, like it can't get more specific. Let the reader understand, and let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those on the housetops not go down and get anything, yada, yada, yada. So obviously Jesus in Matthew 24 and Luke 21, he's talking about the same event, because he commands or exhorts in both passages for the believers to flee to Judea and get out of Dodge, right? But in one, he says it's when armies are surrounding Jerusalem. And in the other passage, it's when the abomination of causes desolation. So are those the same things? Armies surrounding Jerusalem and the abomination of desolation, are those the same things according to these two passages? And Jesus says, which Daniel spoke about?
Well, I would say no, that they are not the same thing. Now, no doubt they're using similar language, which of course Jesus does all the time. And here's why. If you compare, which we could, I have time, I got all night. If you compare the rest of the verses in Luke 21:20 all the way through 24, and you compare that with Matthew 24:15 through the rest of the passage in 29, you will see that there's two different things being discussed here. It is a similarity of language, 100%. Well, first of all, Daniel's not mentioned in Luke 21. He doesn't mention Daniel at all there. He talks about desolations happening. Desolations is a generic word that means troubles or wars. He doesn't say abomination of desolation in Luke 21. What you have, if you compare Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13, and you do a harmony of them, it's actually kind of fun. You'll see that in the beginning that they asked Jesus basically three questions, because Jesus just got done showing them the temple, the buildings. Isn't this beautiful? And then he goes, "Hey, do you see all the buildings here? They're all going to be thrown down, not one stone on one another." Now, that had to be a punch in the gut for these Jewish guys, because they're already thinking about the kingdom. In fact, after Jesus was resurrected, before he ascended, what did they say? Are you going to restore the kingdom now? And Jesus didn't rebuke them. He didn't say, it's a spiritual kingdom. What's wrong with you knuckleheads? He says, it's not for you to know the time. It's my Father's. So he did not rebuke them for that because they understood all the prophecies, as we mentioned, the Messiah ben David. But what he does after he shocks their world about saying that Jerusalem will be destroyed, they say, hey, what are going to be the signs of this, Jerusalem's destruction? What are going to be the signs of the end of the age? And what are going to be the signs of your coming? So in those three questions, in the book of Luke, it's interesting that in Luke, he answers the question. Luke is the only one that writes about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. But he doesn't mention the abomination of desolation. Only Matthew and Mark talk about that. Matthew and Mark don't discuss the destruction of Jerusalem when it's surrounded by armies. If you look at Matthew 24 and Mark 13, the language is different. It doesn't talk about Jerusalem being surrounded by armies at all. It goes in and says specifically false Christs and goes on and leads up to where the abomination of desolation get out of town. And then in Matthew 24:22, it says, this is the time, then there shall be great tribulation, which has never existed in the history of the world from the time of creation on. Well, you go. Now, here's my problem with some of the partial preterists that want to see all of these fulfilled in 70 AD. Matthew 24 is not talking about 70 AD. Luke 21, I agree with you, is. But Matthew 24, the abomination of desolation, using similar language, there's a repeat of a cycle here that in the future, he tells them the same thing. Don't come down, get out of town and leave. But he says, this is the worst time in the history of the world. Well, if they're talking about the same event, was the destruction of Jerusalem the worst time in the history that's ever existed in the entire history of humanity? Clearly not. So
I don't know. It sounded pretty bad.
Oh, I'm not saying it was a walk in the park, but Jesus is talking about the worst time in the history of the world in humanity.
Is it possible that we don't know really what went down in AD 70?
I mean, what we do know is like everybody getting killed, people eating their children, like all sorts of crazy stuff. I don't know. It's hard to quantify a statement like that realistically. Like where's the data so that we can compare this atrocity versus this atrocity versus this atrocity? I understand. I respect the notion of like trying to take things literally. I side on that. I side with that as well, as much as I possibly can. You know, that's why I still think there's going to be Scorpion with the
Revelation
wings,
9,
with wings and the faces, hair of women and stuff. I'm all about it. Okay, but when it comes to something like this, that it's the worst time in human history or the worst atrocity in human history, it's like no way to take that. Not that you can't take it literally, but there's no way to validate it literally.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Here's what I would say is that you look at World War II, World War I, hundreds of millions of killed, whatever. I mean, that we look at any wars. Yeah. You could look at same thing as you mentioned. What do we know about 70 AD? We know a lot actually because of Josephus.
Oh, for sure.
Josephus was an eyewitness. So you read that, and it was bad. But was it as bad as what happened with Babylon when the Nebuchadnezzar came in? Not necessarily. And so here's how you quantify it. If you look at what happened in 70 AD in a local, I mean, Jerusalem's not that big. Okay, right. So yeah, okay, Jerusalem is pretty small. So here you have this small containment where you had basically, several 100,000 Jews killed. Well, that's not even as bad as the Holocaust, okay? But Jesus is saying, this is what Jesus said, this will be the worst time in the history of humanity and anything ever in the future. So you think, well, what about 6 million Jews getting killed in Holocaust? Well, there was only 600,000 over here. So, if this is how you quantify it, if you read the book of Revelation, 6 through 18, you'll see in Revelation 6, a quarter of the earth is killed. That's 2 billion people. You look in Revelation 19, a third of the earth is killed. That's another 2 billion people. 4 billion people. You have scorpions. You have earthquakes. You have you just read that. I mean,
so are you just saying because of volume, more people died? So it's going to be in the future, more people die. So that's going to be the worst time in human history. It just matters how many.
No. Well, that's just one category. If you look at what's happening, you have comets, you have asteroids, you have the sun boiling over, becoming a nova, you have plagues, you have water being this, you have all the animals in the sea being killed. You have you just go through if you go through the bowl judgments and the trumpet judgments, and you look at and you look at Isaiah 13, Isaiah 24, the earth is shaking because of this huge earthquake that's never existed in the history of humanity. Revelation 16. If you just use humanity, Jesus said this in the same passage of Matthew 24. After he said this is going to be the worst time, he said, you know what? If it wasn't shortened, there'd be no humanity left. So you can't say that about 70 AD. Jesus is saying there will be no humanity left if God didn't shorten it to this specific time. There's no comparison to that and the descriptions of Revelation 6 or 18 and 70 AD in a local part, a backwater part, a country part of the Roman Empire, in a little city of Jerusalem where 600,000 people were killed.
Let me read it. Matthew 24:21. For then there will be great distress, unequal, from the beginning of the world until now. From the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, okay, we don't got to read the rest.
Yeah.
So if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive.
No humanity. I mean, that's the key. So the key in Revelations, Jesus's words there in Matthew 24, Mark 13, fit perfectly with the book of Revelation's description of what's going to happen with, again, the waters turning to blood, poison, wormwood, you name it. Again, all the animals in the ocean are killed, a third of the ships. If you just take them line by line by line, you're going, now I can, if you want a quantification, man, read that. That quantifies what Jesus said about this worst time in history. And then you see what Luke is saying. These are days of vengeance for sure. I'm not saying that that's not true, but Luke answers when you see Jerusalem surrounded. Matthew 24 doesn't use that language.
Yeah, it's interesting that Daniel says, and we know this historically, that the people of the prince will destroy the city, right? Then Jesus in Luke 21 says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies.
That's the sign. That's the sign. They were asked, what's the sign?
Right.
When you see it surrounded, get out.
So do you think that Luke 21 is talking about the people of the prince destroying the city?
Yes.
And then Matthew 24 says, when you see the abomination of desolation, which the prophet Daniel spoke about, flee to Judea. So the language of fleeing to Judea is the same, but they're describing the events of Daniel 9 differently, or they're
no.
Actually, they're not describing it differently. They're just using different. Matthew's using a different portion. He's using the abomination of desolation portion of Daniel 9, and Luke is using the people of the prince, the army. So do you see what I mean?
Yes, and let me bring this up. I can do this really quick if you give me a second, is that if you look, I think that when Jesus uses the abomination language, he's not referring to Daniel 9:27 necessarily. Why? Well, because abomination of desolation appears in Daniel 11:31 and Daniel 12:11. So it's not necessarily tied to the Daniel 9:26 and 27 prophecy. When it says spoken of by Daniel,
even though their question is, when will these things happen, like the destruction of the temple?
Yes, because here's why. I got all night, man.
Dennis doesn't.
Okay, fair enough. If you go to Daniel chapter 12, see, this is the beauty. Okay, this is the beauty. Can you do it? Go to Daniel chapter 12.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because here's why. What you just read, which I'm glad you did. You just read this language about the worst time in the history, right? Okay, so in Daniel chapter 12, he brings up the abomination of desolation. I think that's what Jesus is saying, spoken of by Daniel. He's referring to this because why? It says in Daniel 12, verse 1, ESV, at that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never has been since there was a nation until that time. Well, doesn't that sound familiar? That sounds like exactly what Jesus said. And I think Jesus is quoting this. So when Jesus talks about the abomination of desolation, which he just referenced, and he talks about this time that's never been since the history of humanity, he's saying, look at Daniel chapter 12, not Daniel 9. And then notice when he keeps going, he says, but at that time, your people shall be delivered, they shall be rescued, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting death. He says, at that time as well, there'll be a resurrection. He says, those who are wise shall shine. He goes, but you, Daniel, shut it up. And then he goes down. If you keep going, he says, and look in verse 7, he says, I heard the man clothed in linen who was above the waters. He raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and he swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. That's 3.5 years. Okay, there's a dual in Hebrew, so you have 1 plus 2 plus a half is 3.5. He says, and that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things will be finished. And then in verse 11, he talks about the abomination, which you don't have time to get into. But what he's saying is there's a 3.5 year period of massive amounts of destruction and this time of great tribulation. That's how long it lasts, which is what Jesus said in Matthew 24, 21, and 22. And it begins with the abomination of desolation. And he said, this is going to be a time that's never existed. And it's going to involve an abomination of desolation, which you see in verse 11 of Daniel 12. So it's beautiful. So it's not Daniel 9:27. So if we try to use the language of Daniel 9:27 here, we're going to be missing the whole point, because Jesus points us to Daniel 12 to understand the connection to the abomination, not Daniel 9. How do we know that? Because of the similarity of the language as it relates to this is the time that's going to be the worst time in the history of humanity, which is exactly what Daniel says there as well. So I think Jesus is quoting Daniel 12.
And so the abomination of desolation in Daniel 9 is different than the one in Daniel 12?
I think let's go back to that. I think what he's, okay, hold on. Here we go. Let's go back to this. There we go. You see let's go here. He says, I'm reading the ESV. He said, on the wing of abominations. Okay, so he shall come one who makes desolate until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. The point being is that he doesn't use the exact phraseology abomination of desolation here in this verse.
I see what you're saying.
He uses it in Daniel 11:31 and Daniel 12:11. So that's what I'm saying. There's abominations, there's desolations, but those are kind of generic terms. But the phrase abomination of desolation, that appears exactly in Daniel 11 and in Daniel 12 and Matthew 24:15 and Mark 13. Not in Daniel 9:27. Mm-hmm.
Well,
really quick, Cam, remember Cam, our brother Cam? He says, hi, Mondo, by the way. He says, I just want to read his comment if you can speak to it, but he says, you can't separate the synoptic gospels, Luke 21 and Matthew 24 are synoptic.
Oh, snap.
Well, synoptic, yes, 100%. That's why I think that what we do is, if you're going to look at the Olivet Discourse, you have to line them all up in harmony. And then you'll see, then you're able to see the similarities, but also the differences. And it's amazing where you see, why didn't Matthew or Mark talk anything about the actual destruction of Jerusalem itself and being surrounded? Only Luke does that. So,
but there's a lot of stuff that that one gospel has, the other doesn't. It doesn't mean that they're not describing similar like times or periods, just because one gives details that another one doesn't. It would be very weird if multiple times Jesus just keeps telling people, hey, run to Judea, no matter what's going on, whether it's the Roman Empire surrounding you or whether it's 2000, or I guess from that point forward, 2000 years into the future, and there's an Antichrist. Everybody just needs to keep running to Judea, you know? Well, it sounds more it sounds more likely that it would be describing the same thing. Like I just said, if Matthew, Mark, Luke, the synoptics, if they leave out certain things, it doesn't mean they're not describing the same event. And then when they all, well, not all, because I don't know, does Mark talk about fleeing to Judea?
Let's look it up. Mark 13.
So it does. Mark does as well.
Let's see here. I think what you'll find if you do a Mark 13:14, it does say, when you see the abomination of desolation standing where it ought not to be, let the reader. He doesn't mention Daniel here. He should have, but he didn't. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who's in the housetop go on, and alas, pray that this doesn't happen winter. But see, again, for in those days, so this is context. In those days, the days that he tells them to flee, he said, there will be such tribulation as has not been from the beginning of the creation that God created until now and never will be. So what I find even interesting here is that if you go through, and I encourage you to do this, if you go back and compare that section of Luke 21, and then you compare it to Matthew and Mark, you'll see that it is describing a different event. There's similar events and even similar language, because what you see in the Bible is cycles, and you see these patterns where the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD is similar to the destruction that's going to happen, which I think in the future tribulation period, which is also similar to, if you go back and read Daniel 11:31, and you see what happened at the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, where he committed an abomination of desolation.
Right.
He did the same thing. He stopped the sacrifices. He put a pig on the altar, and he committed an abomination of desolation historically. So you see a cycle repeating. So I would say 167 BC, 70 AD, and then 2026. Can we? No, it's probably too early. 2030. Okay, we're set dates. But if you go back and see that, if you compare them, you'll see that even though they're similar language, they are different events, clearly, because
so I'm glad you brought up the pig sacrifice. So that was an abomination of desolation, right?
Back in Daniel 11:30, well,
which was like in 140 something BC.
167 BC.
167. Mm-hmm. But then the Romans entering the temple, sacking it, destroying it, wouldn't that also qualify as an abomination of desolation?
Well, the difference is the language that Jesus used specifically in Matthew 24:15, and I think, let's see what he says in Mark.
But I'm just saying, I know the language is different, but I'm just saying categorically
similar.
Gentiles coming in and destroying the temple, just like a sacrifice of a pig is an abomination of desolation. Gentiles coming in, trampling the grounds, and destroying the temple would probably also be an abomination of desolation.
Yep.
So
the key distinction is the word, when you see it standing in the holy place. That is very unique language in Matthew 24:15 and Mark 13. That's different than what happened with Antiochus, and that's different with the Romans. Here he's talking about something specifically standing in there. There's no mention of a sacrifice of a pig on the altar, even though that would be abomination, or the Romans being in there at all in the Holy of Holies. Can you imagine? Of course, they'd be desecrating it all. But that specific language is the only place it's used. Luke doesn't use it. Nobody else uses it. There's something being put in the temple, standing there. Is that the image of the beast? Revelation 13. I don't know. We don't know.
Yeah,
it's different than just a 24:15.
24:15. So when you see standing in the holy place, in quotes, because he's quoting from Daniel, the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel. So I guess it goes to if the prophet Daniel was speaking about the armies of the prince as being the abomination of desolation or not.
Which that language is not used. It's used again in Daniel 11:31 and Daniel 12:11.
I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dennis, we did it again, bro.
Is he falling asleep?
We got more confused.
No, I enjoy this. And Cam was responding a little bit more. I do kind of want to read what he said again, because it's good. I can't pronounce this, Antiochus Epiphanes, was a direct fulfillment of the abomination of desolation. Most scholars agree on this. Jesus's use of it in the Olivet Discourse is typological recapitulation. Why do you got to use such hard words, Cam?
Because he can.
In the holy, yes. In the holy place is exactly what was destroyed, the temple, the holy place. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, what you'll see if people want, I did a deep dive on this where if you go to prophecywatchers.com/Daniel 9, I go through this line by line, from the Hebrew, looking at it. But what I have there is I have a chart showing the antics of Antiochus Epiphanes in 167 and the comparison of what the Bible says is going to happen in the future. Because what we do see is when you read Josephus, he gives us a detail, but it is the details there are not indicative. They don't match. Again, there's a type here. I agree with what's saying. Antiochus is clearly a type of the Antichrist, clearly, and this is why Jesus says what you saw in the past is going to happen again in the future, and all the descriptors that you have of, again, as I said, Matthew 24, Mark 13. Cannot be fulfilled in 70 AD. It simply just doesn't fit with, again, the universality of the language there. No doubt some parts of the Olivet Discourse clearly were fulfilled in 70 AD. No one's denying that, because, again, they asked Jesus, what is going to be the sign of the destruction of Jerusalem? You just told us the buildings are going to be destroyed. Right. But he says, and the end of the age, and of Jesus' second coming. So there's 3 signs. So we know that there's 3 things. Has Jesus come back yet? Obviously not in his full glory with all the angels ruling and reigning. So in Matthew 24 and Mark 13, we go, all of them, if you harmonize them, we go from answering the 3 questions to 70 AD. Luke gives a description. When you go to the Jesus' second coming at the end, they give a fuller description with similar language because it fits the typology, again, of both 70 AD and also of Antiochus in 167. So the language there of this universality of judgment that we read is horrible. Never again in the history of the world. Point you to Daniel chapter 12. Same language. Abomination, the same language. And tribulation, same language. Clearly, that's at the time of the end, it says there. And it's at the time of Jesus' second coming, which he comes back to earth and fixes everything. And that clearly hasn't happened yet.
Anything else from Cam?
Nope. Someone else, the baseball wife. However, Antiochus did not proclaim himself above all that is God. He had tribute to Zeus there.
Oh, yeah. What she's talking about is in 2 Thessalonians 2:4, the Antichrist, the man of lawlessness, is going to come into the temple of God, declaring himself to be God and declaring himself to be above all that is called God. And you see this in Daniel 11:45 and other 37 through 45. That second half is all about this future guy, blasphemer, doesn't worship the God of his fathers. That's what she's referring to. Again, all those things never happened. They didn't happen in 70 AD. Titus didn't go in there and declare himself to be God. So again, you have the consistency of all these other passages that come into play, and they harmonize perfectly with a future 70th week of Daniel. All of them perfect harmony.
You think that was just the enemy messing with us, trying to make it look like the prophecy is being fulfilled, but it's not?
Yes, but I don't want to impugn my brothers and sisters. I just think that if we all believe that it happened and fulfilled in 70 AD, there's nothing to look forward to. I'm not wanting. I don't mean wanting to, but there's nothing in the future, and therefore,
we're not full preterists. We're partial preter, right? So the things.
Who is you? Did you just take a label? Did you just take a label?
It'll change.
Listen, okay. I ebb and flow. I
don't like labels either, so I don't want a label on me.
Depending on the YouTube video I watched that week, that's what I align with. No, because in reality, listen, these conversations have been happening for 2,000 years because both sides have reasonable arguments. The issue Dennis and I have been kind of dealing with, not well, but that we've been trying to deal with, has been like the system of dispensationalism as a whole, because it seems like it's a filter through which people go back into scripture and like interpret all things in scripture. It's through this I don't know how to put it other than a system, you know.
Oh, it's a
Uh,
system. There's no doubt.
it's a system,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
And then the nail in the coffin for me in regards to that system is that, and I've made some videos on this. I don't know if you've seen them on the Instagrams, but that it's purely dispensationalists, not all, not saying that, who are the ones participating in fulfilling the prophecies that they believe need to be fulfilled in order to usher in the Messiah, which I don't agree with. I don't think that that's right. I get it. Earlier in the show, you were saying, like, here's Daniel praying, like, hey, I recognize that this prophecy needs to be fulfilled. What's next? You know, but he's not actively going out and like donating to the king to like help rebuild Jerusalem or something. I don't know. I don't know how to, you know, he's not trying to breed heifers to have sacrificed before the new temple is created. But today it's purely dispensationalists who are going out of their way to almost like self-fulfill the prophecies that they are interpreting, and other Christians are not interpreting those things that way, you know. So that to me seems kind of like I'm all for praying, despite what you think is going to happen in the end times. I'm all for praying about your family, about the future of the country, about the world, about Christ's coming. Like, we're encouraged to pray for these things, but going out and trying to make them happen because you think those things have to happen in order for Christ to come back seems kind of manipulative, you know, like God's not going to do it unless you're out there, bro, like making it happen. That seems so crazy to me. So I'm not throwing all dispies. And when I say that,
Please.
it's just short for dispensational.
Yeah,
You know?
please don't, because
I'm not
what I
throwing
was-
all of them in there. I get it. I grew up dispensational. So like nobody in my church was breeding heifers, and
Yes.
you know,
I would not allow. I would do the same thing for if somebody who is a covenant or reformed, and you could find anybody that applies in their eschatology, let's say, to any system, because they're all systems in some way. Okay, Reformed theology, covenant theology, they have their own system, and even partial preterists have their own system. But what I don't want to do is to dismiss the merits of any one of those systems based on somebody that abuses that system.
oh,
So
sure.
in the same way, dispensationalism or even Christianity, dispensationalism should not be judged on its value or truthfulness based on how some people abuse it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that because I know not all of them are into it, but Mondo, let's be frank, like
I've
some
totally
of the biggest
yes,
names
agreed with you.
in dispensationalism are trying to fulfill the prophecies themselves, whether it's via donations, whether it's support of the nation or the Temple Institute and their endeavor. You know, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars being sent by evangelical, like
Agreed.
dispensational pastors to these foundations and institutes to do these things with the intent of bringing about Jesus, you know? And I think that's pretty wild. And I don't think we're supposed to, we're not supposed to partner with Satan because we believe Christ wins in the end. So we should expedite the end. That's wild. That's so wild. Then just launch nukes, you know? Just launch nukes and Jesus will have to come back to stop it. Otherwise, all humanity and Israel will be destroyed, and he'll never let that happen, you know? And I don't know if is there any similarity or comparable with any other like denomination or system? Like, is anybody else trying to make anything happen? I don't see the downside to other systems.
Well, what you have if you look at that's a little challenging, because if you go 100 years ago to the church movements, you'll see that, let's say, like the Assemblies of God, or even the charismatic movement, or even many of the messianic movements, they were very future oriented. Okay, they believed in future, even Seventh-day Adventism and stuff like that. Well, 100 years ago, Methodists had already gone allegorical. Presbyterians had all had, they basically started covenantal, so they're kind of allegorical and symbolic. All millennial, I guess I'd say it that way. If you look at all those groups, so they don't really count. They most of those groups, Lutherans, etc., kind of were born out of the Protestant Reformation. In that it's interesting to me because I love studying that time period, and what you'll find is one of the things that rescued or was the cause of the Protestant Reformation was taking a historical grammatical hermeneutic. What that means is they took things literal, and they arrived at the gospel because they took the idea of atonement. They took it very literal, where Rome had made everything, a lot of things symbolic or allegorical or whatever. So what they did is their literalism rescued the gospel, but they did not go into eschatology. It's like they stopped and they said, well, we understand Rome was wrong because they didn't take the Bible literal here, but they stayed, the Protestant Reformation stayed symbolic like Rome when it came to eschatology. So later groups, this was before Darby even. Okay, this had nothing to do with Darby.
Sure.
You look, Darby was 1830. So you look at, there's a book out there called Dispensationalism Before Darby, and it goes back to the 1600s basically in England. And so what this guy writes is he says, what you have is after the Protestant Reformation, most of the reformers like Geneva, John Calvin, those guys, Martin Luther, Melanchthon, all these other guys, they kind of stayed in their allegorical, figurative approach, which it related to eschatology. But some of the other groups in England and Scotland, they were like, well, hey, literal got us the gospel. What does that look like as it relates to future events? So they started taking things literal, and they started thinking, oh, wow, Israel's coming back. So they started reading the prophecies in the Old Testament in a very literal way. And of course, as they mentioned, it happened. 1948, Israel came back because that's what the scripture literally says. So
yeah, but you know what's wild? Like if you dive into the history of the events, obviously God's sovereign. I'm not saying that, but it was dispensationalists within America and England that helped facilitate the birth of the nation once again, of Israel.
100%.
Had dispensationalism not been a factor, there wouldn't have been support for this nation in the American government and in the English government. So it's a really weird thought experiment. You know, the idea of like what came first, the chicken or the egg? To me, it's what came first, the prophecies or dispensationalism.
Right.
Like, what if dispensationalism is accounted for in God's plan to bring about dispensationalism?
You said it. God is sovereign. I mean? If they weren't there, God would have done it another way. Because, well, actually, the first one who originated it, really, at least from a modern state, was Theodor Herzl, who was a secular Jew.
Right.
So he wasn't certainly, he was a Jew, and he was even
secular. He proposed it, and then they used, there's a really, really good, it's 30 hours long though, kind of like this podcast. But I highly recommend it. It's a 6-part series. It's called Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem. And the guy's not Christian. He just analyzes the history from World War I to World War II and just what led up to the formation of the state of Israel. Yeah. It's fascinating. And even though he's not Christian, brings up the evangelical element within American 100%. And British governments.
Yep.
You know?
You said God's sovereign, and God,
for sure.
That thought experiment is good. That this it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but I find it interesting that God put it in this book, knowing in advance that some people in the future would read it and then seek to do it. But nevertheless, it was going to happen regardless of who was there.
For sure. I'll give you another example is if this is what it really means, but you know, there's the statue of the leopard with the wings and the body of or the feet of a bear or whatever outside the UN, you know, and it was donated by a Mexican artist to the UN like 10 years ago or something like that. But then it's the exact replica of one of the beasts mentioned in Revelation. So if John if John is having a vision like 2000 years ago on Patmos and like sees this statue, and so he describes this beast, which is representative of the UN, but then the Mexican artist reads that and is like, oh, that sounds dope. So he creates the statue and puts it in front. That's what I mean. Like it's a self-fulfilling cyclical, I don't know what you call it. I don't know what you call it, but it's like those movies where they go into the future, they make a change, then they go into the past and they realize that the future played out the way it always did because they made the change in the future. Like it's just this crazy mind thing, you know? It's been an interesting year, Mondo. Let's just
and it's
say
not done. It's not done.
It's going to get more interesting.
Barely started. Yep.
Let me finish up with the chat here a little bit.
Yeah, please.
Before we end here. I know we kind of went away from what our discussion was there right at the end, but Cam did have a question that I did want to, because he did respond a little bit later or ask a question later. And it was kind of, Mondo, I'd like you to kind of answer this if you can. Why should we hope that our flight is not on the Sabbath? Matthew 24:20. That doesn't fit a global paradigm.
Oh, well, depending on your perspective. What I mean is Jesus is talking specifically to those that are living in Jerusalem, because he says, when you see abominations standing in the holy place, well, that's the temple, that's Jerusalem. I don't think he's talking to Christians. He's not. So it's not about, because we don't care about the Sabbath. The Sabbath isn't binding on us as a Gentile believer.
I care very much.
Well, what I mean is,
well, then you better pray it's not on the Sabbath, Dennis.
Then you better. But that's an assumption.
Sabbaths are the best.
Well, no, that's fine. But the assumption, there's not even an assumption. The text is clearly speaking to those that are in Jerusalem, that are Jewish. That he says, pray that it's not on the Sabbath, because why? According to Jewish rules, you can only go so far on the Sabbath.
Oh,
right?
They're screwed.
They're screwed. And so that's what he's saying is you can only go 2,000 whatever state here.
You gotta die.
And then you're going to have this violation that what am I supposed to do now? But I don't believe that Christians are going to even be in the tribulation. Okay. That's for another topic. I'm a pre-trib guy, and I'll defend it to the end. Okay. For good reason. I don't listen. You guys know me. I'm a thinker. I don't just accept things. I have all my reasons, right? And I love
that's why we have you on, because you do think all the different angles.
Heck yeah.
All the different angles. So, but all that to say is that I think the reason. So when he says it's not going to, how does that affect us? I don't think it affects us at all, because it's talking to Jewish people who are in the context of in Jerusalem and they see it. So that's not a worldwide thing. But he in the next few verses he mentions that that's the beginning of a time period that is the worst that's ever existed in the history of humanity. So that's the clock that shows that the whole world, that massive great tribulation that even spoken of in Daniel 12 is going to extend to the whole world. And again, all you have to do is read Revelation 6 or 18, and you'll see this is a worldwide phenomenon of judgment. And Isaiah 13, Isaiah 24, other passages.
Okay. This is a good place this is a good place to end. Can I tell you something funny before we go?
Sure.
Do you want to hear where I land on all of this stuff? Like currently? Okay. So I don't believe in a rapture. I don't. Hold on. You'll have to come back. Hey, you'll have to come back. Come back. I don't believe that Israel is like, or the Jewish people are special in any way. I think that they're like, they need to participate in the church for anything, for any significance whatsoever. They're as significant as we are. Okay. What else? Hey, I still believe in a millennial kingdom.
That's
like a literal one. Okay.
That's good.
I know you like that one.
I like that.
And then what else? So I shouldn't say I don't believe in a rapture. I don't believe in a pre-tribulation rapture.
Okay.
Because I believe that we will be raptured at the end of all things when God creates a new heaven, new earth. I think we're up, transfigured, and down to the new earth. That's what I believe the rapture is. Dennis, is there anything else that we don't believe in?
Right? Why are you including me on this?
I was going to say, does he speak for you, Dennis?
Come on, we're Bennis.
No.
I think there's hope for Dennis.
Thanks, Mondo. We were talking about it earlier.
Son, come on, son, make me father proud.
You're my only hope, Dad. If I didn't have you in my life, what would I have? I just have Ben and his confusing topics. No, we were talking about it earlier, and then he said something that I totally agreed with, and I was like, yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at in a lot of those places. I'm there too. But I honestly can't think of all of those lists right now that determine, a post-mill, on-mill, all this stuff. So I'm not going to even try to.
Well, we're not any of those. We're not any of those. Right. We're a rainbow. We're a unicorn. We're a mix of a lot of things. Yeah. Like nobody believes that like there is no pre-trib rapture. Yeah, you're a they them. We're a they them. They them. Hey, nobody believes that there is no pre-trib rapture, that Israel is not chosen anymore, but there's still a millennial reign, a millennial kingdom, like a literal one. I think that's kind of unique,
I think with all these conversations, the thoughts that are forming in my head at least, and I can't get into them because I don't even know how to say them clearly yet, but they're a little bit more different, where it does blend a lot of things, but
it blends.
It blends a lot, but it then also just brings up even more questions, right? So, but back to the chat just a little bit, because a lot of people want to have you back, Mondo, to talk dispensationalism. So if you're down for that, we'd love to do that with you. Yeah,
we had an expert on to talk pre-trib rapture. I don't know, like a year and a half ago.
Who was it?
I don't want to say.
You said expert.
Yeah,
I'll text you.
Okay, I'm usually familiar with all the experts.
And going into all the details after the conversation was over, I'm like, oh, I don't believe in a pre-trib rapture anymore.
Yeah, he probably wasn't an expert.
Well, I'll text you.
Okay, text me.
But yeah, and everyone loves you, Mondo. Thanks for being with us. Everyone, you've lit our chat up for sure tonight. Everybody was really engaged. Thanks for everybody who is hanging out with us. Thanks, Lynette, for manning the chat. They definitely want to have you back. We always want to have you back, Mondo.
Yeah, it's great.
And what I'm just trying to see if I'm zooming through here. Yeah, people are talking about the rapture and other stuff. So you definitely have to come back. We'll talk more about this. Everyone, go check out Mondo Gonzales, Prophecy Watchers. What is the Screwtape lettered guide? What was it called?
And I want to talk about that too.
Yeah, we do want to talk about that. Yeah.
That's probably the best thing I've ever written and ever will write. The Screwtape Letter Study Guide.
Yeah.
It's the most extensive study guide that exists on every letter. If you ever read the Screwtape letters, it's phenomenal. It is the best spiritual transformation that you'll ever have in your spiritual life. Truly, it addresses so many things. It's amazing what he gets into, and I unpack everything line by line.
That's cool.
I quote over 1,000 scriptures in the book,
Wow.
and it took me about 5 years to write.
Wow! And you did this all before ChatGPT?
I did. I wish I would have ChatGPT.
It's the real deal.
It's the old school research.
Yeah, old school. This is calculators type stuff.
Worth reading, I'm sure. Thank you, Mondo, for all that you do for the community, for the kingdom of God. Really, you are a blessing, man, to us. You've been a huge blessing to Ben and I, and to people that love you. They're only here for you. They're not here for us whatsoever.
Oh, that's not true.
But seriously, brother, thank you so much, and many blessings. And come back again soon. And thank you to everybody again who's hung with us tonight. So thank you very much. Have a great night, everyone.
Yeah. See you guys.